Hey everyone, it's me, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm shaking writing this. I just got back from a weekend stay in a so-called charming Airbnb near Galveston, and what happened there? Well, let's just say I'll never book a solo getaway in Texas again. Tonight, I'm sharing 20 bone-chilling, true stories from real guests across Texas folks who booked what looked like a peaceful escape, only to wake up to whispers, footsteps in empty hallways, and things crawling out of locked attics. I promise you, after hearing just one of these tales, you'll think twice before clicking that book now button. If you've ever stayed in a house that felt just a little too quiet, or had a door that wouldn't stay closed, you'll want to stick around. And if your room feels a little colder right now, you might want to check the thermostat, just to be sure. Before we get started, tell me, have you ever had a creepy Airbnb experience? Drop your story in the comments and brace yourself, because we're about to enter 20 terrifying rentals across Texas where the guests weren't the only ones staying overnight. Let's go. The house sat at the end of a sleepy street, tucked between wind-bent palm trees and rotting picket fences. From the photos, it looked like something plucked out of a travel blog. Sky blue exterior, big porch swing, shutters like sleepy eyelids. A perfect escape, promised the listing. Walking distance to the Gulf, vintage charm with modern comfort. But beneath the filters and cheerful captions, something about the place looked too still, like it had been waiting. The booking had been impulsive. Julie was tired, heartbroken, and freshly unemployed. She needed air that didn't smell like her ex's cologne, and Galveston was close enough to feel like a getaway, but far enough to be somewhere else. She didn't read the reviews carefully, just saw that it was discounted, open for the week, and had more character than those sterile condos on the seawall. She remembered thinking the one-star reviews were dramatic. One said, "Something's wrong with the air here." Another wrote, "Do not sleep in the upstairs bedroom." We woke up coughing up sand, literal sand. She laughed it off. Probably mold, or someone being dramatic after a bad vacation. Trolls existed. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky already dipped in that sulky pink that Texas skies sometimes wear before a storm. The key was in the lockbox, just like the host promised. The air inside was warm and heavy, but she chalked it up to the house being old. Smelled like salt and age and the faintest hint of mildew. The layout was simple. Living room with faded yellow wallpaper peeling at the corners, kitchen with mismatched tile, 2 bedrooms, 1 downstairs, 1 upstairs under a sloping roof. The attic door was in the hallway ceiling, the kind you pull down with a string. It didn't budge when she tried it, just gave a dull thunk like something pressing against it from the other side. She let it go. The upstairs bedroom was the prettiest room in the house. Slanted ceiling, a little round window with a view of the waterline in the distance, an antique iron bed frame with a quilt that looked hand-stitched. Julie liked that room instantly. She put her suitcase down, cracked open a window, and let the sea air drift in. The first night, nothing happened. She fell asleep to the sound of wind rattling the siding, gulls crying like lost children in the dark. But around 3 a.m., something stirred her awake. Her mouth was dry and gritty, and when she licked her lips, she tasted salt. She sat up slowly, reached for the lamp. The quilt had shifted. There was sand between her sheets. She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Her brain tried to make excuses. Maybe she tracked some in on her feet. Maybe the wind blew it in. But there was too much. It was in her hair, under her nails, sticking to her teeth. The next morning, she brushed her tongue raw, trying to get the taste out. She vacuumed the floor and stripped the sheets, shaking them out over the back porch. The sand was fine and gray, not the golden, dry kind from the beach. It was damp, like it had just been scooped from a tide pool. She considered sleeping downstairs the second night, but the bed up there was so comfortable, and she told herself the sand thing was a fluke. Maybe the old house had gaps in the walls. Maybe it was just one of those weird things that happen and never happen again. She left the window shut this time. That night, she woke again. Same time, mouth full of sand. Only now, the attic door above her creaked. She held still in the dark, heart thudding. The sound wasn't loud, just a soft shift like a board settling. But it wasn't the kind of sound the wind makes. It had a rhythm, and then came the whispering. Not words exactly. More like dry lips brushing against wood. A hush-hush that felt ancient and wet. She stared up at the ceiling where the attic door sat flush, her body stiff under the covers. The whispering didn't get louder. It just continued, steady and close, like someone pacing just above her head. Then came a single thump. Not a crash. A deliberate step. She slept downstairs after that. Dragged the couch cushions to the living room floor and curled up like a child. The house felt colder now, though the thermostat still blinked a steady 72. She tried playing music, leaving lights on, pretending nothing had happened. But at 3 a.m., the lights flickered. The stereo turned itself off. The sound of something dragging across the floorboards above made her clamp her hands over her ears. She checked out the next morning, left the key on the table, and drove away without even glancing in the rear view. She didn't message the host, didn't leave a review, just wanted to forget. But she COULDN single quotes T. She started Googling the property late at night after wine and bad dreams. The house was old, turn of the century, used to belong to a man named Edwin Carrick who'd run a boarding home for sailors. His wife disappeared in 1921. No record of her body. Rumors of madness. A locked attic. Julie went back to the listing once just to see. It was still there. New photos. Brighter lighting. A new host name. But the reviews, the reviews were worse now. One guest said they found sand in their ears. Another wrote that something kissed them in their sleep. One claimed they opened the attic and found a bed up there, made up fresh, with a wet pillow and footprints leading away. And the most recent review, 1 star, of course, said, "I tried to leave. The door wouldn't open. The house doesn't want you to leave. I only escaped because something else came through the attic door, and it wanted the bed." Julie never went near Galveston again. Not even to drive through. But sometimes, when she wakes in the middle of the night, she still tastes the sand. And the sound of whispering leaks from her ceiling vent, soft and wet and impossible. She wasn't supposed to be in that part of Texas. Corpus Christi was her planned final stop. She had made the drive from Waco in one long stretch. The kind of journey that turned your spine into a question mark and made the wheel feel like part of your skeleton. But the weather had other plans. A thick rolling fog had swept over the highway like spilled milk by dusk, turning the road into a ghost trail with no edge, no depth, just a gray smear in every direction. Her GPS stuttered and then gave up entirely somewhere outside a town called Mathis. No signal. No Wi-Fi. No fellow cars, not even trucks. Just her little black Honda Civic humming alone through the mist. That's when she saw the vacancy sign, blinking red against the fog like a blood clot in the throat of the landscape. It was attached to a low-slung building that looked like it had been dropped there in the 60s and forgotten. El Camino Inn, the wooden board read, the paint cracked and curling like old scabs. She hesitated, but her bladder didn't, so she pulled in. The clerk behind the counter was a man in his 60s, with a jaundiced eye that didn't quite focus and skin like the paper on old Bibles. He barely looked up from his radio. The static murmured behind him, and the reception bell looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. When she gave him her name, Melissa Harding, he asked no questions, just pushed a key across the counter. No credit card. No ID. Just a nod toward room 7, the far corner room that looked like it had the best chance of collapsing first in a strong wind. The key was real metal. Heavy. The kind with jagged edges and a little plastic tab that read 7 in faded marker. The room wasn't bad. Not at first. Dim yellow light buzzed from the ceiling. The bed was made. The air smelled faintly of cigarettes and pine sol. She didn't check the drawers, didn't pull back the curtains. Just dropped her overnight bag on the chair and made a beeline for the bathroom. And that's when she noticed. The bathroom light flicked on by itself. She paused at the threshold. The light, a fluorescent bar over the mirror, buzzed on stark and cold, reflecting the cramped tiled space with uncanny clarity. She stepped inside, looked around. No switch. Just a motion sensor box near the top of the frame. She waved her hand. The light stayed on. Fine, she thought. Cheap motels use those all the time. She peed, washed her face, brushed her teeth quickly, and turned to leave. Click. The light turned off. She paused in the doorway. She hadn't moved. That should have kept it on, right? She shook it off, chalked it up to faulty wiring. The kind of thing you find in out-of-the-way places. She didn't expect much. Just a night of rest and a quick drive out in the morning. She'd laugh about it later. She lay down fully clothed, too tired to dig through her bag for pajamas. The fog outside pressed against the windows like something alive, a crawling thing made of breath and vapor. She left the bathroom door open, a crack, just in case she needed it in the night. She turned off the bedside lamp. Let the darkness soak in. Click. Her eyes flew open. The bathroom light was on. She sat up slowly. The door was still open. The light bled into the room like a hospital. Glare too cold, too sharp. She squinted at the motion sensor, barely visible from this angle. She hadn't moved. She'd been still as stone. She hadn't even turned in bed. She stood up, walked over, and waved her hand slowly through the open doorway. The sensor light stayed steady. She reached up, placed her palm over the sensor. Click. It went off. She backed away, heart thudding harder than it should have. She lay down again, pulled the covers up to her chin. She closed her eyes. Click. Her eyes shot open again. The bathroom glowed like an interrogation room. This time, she stared at the door, unblinking. Maybe it had a delay. Maybe she'd missed something. Maybe. She closed her eyes again, just to test it. Click. She didn't move. Her body locked, breath caught. She opened her eyes, and the light was on. She stood up, more annoyed than afraid, and stalked to the bathroom. She grabbed a towel from the rack, looped it over the motion sensor like a blindfold, smiled to herself. Problem solved. She lay back down and didn't even bother closing her eyes. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed. The fog outside swallowed the world. The hum of the air conditioning grew louder in her ears. She let her eyelids drift shut. Click. She gasped and sat bolt upright. The towel was on the floor, not crumpled like it had fallen spread. Out, smooth, as if someone had unrolled it carefully and placed it down with 2 hands. She stepped back, suddenly cold. Her pulse thumped in her temples. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, no." She grabbed her phone. Still no signal. She opened the door to leave, but the fog had gotten worse. It coiled around her feet like steam, thick and silver gray. She couldn't see past the hood of her car. No clerk, no street. The whole world muffled in cotton. She slammed the door shut and locked it. She went back to the bed and sat there, staring at the bathroom. Click. This time, she saw the sensor blink red, like an eye. A thought came to her, uninvited, like something crawling into her ear. It only turns on when you close your eyes. She blinked hard, rubbed her face. She closed her eyes for one long, deliberate second. Click. She opened them, and for half a heartbeat, there was a figure in the mirror standing behind her. In the bathroom. A tall shape, distorted, wrong angles, no face. She whipped her head around. Empty. Mirror reflected nothing now but the light, the sink, the fogged glass of the shower. She ran to the mirror, pounded on it like it could bleed answers. "Who's there?" she said, her voice barely hers. No reply. Just the sound of her breath, too loud in the small space. And a hum, like static, just below hearing. She turned off the light at the breaker, yanked it hard. The whole room darkened. Silence. She lay down again, this time under the blanket, wrapped like a mummy. No sleep came. Just that humming, that vibrating silence. She must have dozed. She didn't know when, but she woke to the light again. Click. Only this time, the door was open wider. The light cast longer shadows. It reached the edge of her bed. And in that light, just outside the frame of the door, a bare footprint. Wet, small. Facing her, she didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat locked shut. Her body froze. Another print appeared, then another, coming toward her. She bolted. Grabbed her keys and burst into the night barefoot, the gravel biting her soles. The fog parted, only long enough to show her the outline of her car and the man from the front desk standing behind it. But when he turned, his eyes weren't eyes. They were round, empty sockets, smooth, motion sensors. She fled on foot into the dark. No one ever found her car, or her bag, or her body. But every so often, room 7 lights up by itself, and guests report hearing footsteps in the bathroom. Only when they close their eyes. When Tessa moved into the bungalow on Staple Street in Corpus Christi, the realtor had said it was a steal. No one's lived in it for years, and the owners just want it off their hands, she'd said, folding her hands like she was praying for Tessa to take it. It's old, but it has charm. You just have to look past the dust. Tessa was 35, divorced, and tired of apartment life. She wanted a little place with a yard where her dog, Rocco, could sniff around and chase squirrels. The bungalow had that white paint that had blistered under the Gulf Coast sun, windows with flaking green shutters, and a porch swing that looked like it might come loose if you sat on it wrong, but it had charm. And more importantly, she could afford it. It wasn't until the third day, after her boxes were mostly unpacked and the fridge was humming with groceries, that she realized something strange. There were no mirrors in the entire house. Not in the bathroom, not over the mantel, not in the little vanity space beside the bedroom closet where you'd expect at least a small one. Not even in the medicine cabinet, just a rust-stained wall where one might have once been screwed in. At first, she shrugged it off. Maybe the last tenants took them all. Maybe the owners were just the kind of people who didn't like reflections. She told herself she'd get one at Home Goods that weekend. But that night, she felt it. She couldn't say what it was exactly. The house had been empty for years, so sure, there were the usual creaks and groans of a place settling, but this wasn't just that. It felt off. Like when you walk into a room where two people were just arguing, and the air still hums with tension. But there was no one else, just her. And Rocco, who'd begun sleeping with his head up, ears twitching toward the hallway like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. On the fourth night, around 2:30 a.m., she woke up to the sound of breathing, not hers, not Rocco's. A third one, shallow, wet, close. She lay there stiff under the quilt, afraid to even blink. It stopped as soon as she sat up. She turned on the light. Rocco was already off the bed, nose pressed against the space beneath it. He let out a low, nervous whine. "Get away from there," she whispered, tugging him back by his collar. And that's when she saw it. A thin, rectangular object wedged beneath the bed frame, almost flush with the dust-coated floorboards. She reached under, hand trembling, and pulled it out. It was a mirror, about the size of a serving tray, cracked down the center. The glass was clouded, the silvering eaten away at the corners. But what chilled her most was that the reflective side, the mirror's face, was turned downward, hidden, as if someone had intentionally placed it that way. She turned it over slowly. It was wrong. Her reflection stared back, but her eyes weren't her eyes. They were a shade too dark, too sharp, and for a split second they seemed to narrow not. In fear, but recognition. Tessa dropped it. It didn't shatter further, but a shard along the corner snapped off and skittered under the dresser. She stood frozen, breathing hard, the mirror at her feet. Rocco whined again and backed toward the door. In the days that followed, she noticed more. Every time she walked past the reflective surface windows, the shiny toaster, even her phone screen, there was a slight delay. Just a fraction of a second. But her reflection lagged. Like it was remembering how to mimic her. She stopped looking, covered the windows, turned the toaster to face the wall. She tried to throw the mirror away, drove it 10 miles to a Goodwill donation bin, tossed it in, and didn't look back. The next morning, it was back under the bed. Same crack, same eerie weight in her gut. And every time she touched it, she swore she heard whispering words too fast and low to understand, like someone mumbling through a mouthful of sand. By the second week, she was unraveling. She didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. Her phone camera refused to take pictures inside the house, just grainy, gray static. Rocco refused to go near the bedroom and eventually stopped eating. He spent his days staring at the hallway. Mirror she had finally broken down and bought, growling lowly, his eyes fixed not on himself, but something over his shoulder. She tried inviting her sister over. Christy was always the grounded one, the skeptic. But the moment she stepped into the bungalow, her face changed, like she'd walked into something heavy. "You sure you're okay?" she asked. Tessa lied. When Christy went to the bathroom, she came back pale. "You don't have a mirror in there." "I know. Haven't gotten around to it." "There was one," Christy whispered, eyes wide. "On the floor, behind the toilet, just lying there. But when I tried to pick it up, she didn't finish the sentence. She never came back. Wouldn't answer calls. Wouldn't respond to texts." That was when Tessa understood. The house didn't want company. It didn't want witnesses. It only wanted her. She started sleeping on the couch, kept all the lights on, left music playing at night to drown out the whispering, though nothing could stop the feeling of being watched, of something crouched just out of sight, studying her, learning her. The final straw came on a Sunday morning. She was brushing her teeth over the kitchen sink. She'd stopped going into the bathroom altogether when she glanced at the kettle on the stove. Its surface was shiny, polished steel. A crude mirror. Her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. She dropped the toothbrush. The water ran red with blood, though she hadn't cut herself. She stared at the reflection again, and it was waving now, slowly, mockingly, as if to say, "You're not you anymore." Tessa ran. She didn't grab a bag, didn't take Rocco. She just bolted barefoot out the front door, screaming down the sidewalk like a madwoman, waving down a neighbor who'd only seen her once before. They called the police. When officers entered the house, they found Rocco dead, not injured, just gone, like something had sucked the life out of him. No wounds, eyes wide open. The mirror under the bed was gone. So was the new one in the hallway. Every reflective surface in the house had vanished. When Tessa returned days later with the priest in tow, the bungalow looked the same but hollow. The air was dry, still. She didn't stay more than 10 minutes. The priest said he felt nothing unusual, but as he walked out, his phone camera snapped a photo on its own, a blurry image of the bedroom dot, and in the far corner, crouched low by the wall, was a shape, human-shaped, pale, smiling, a hand, pressed to the floor dot as if reaching for something just out of sight. Tessa never went back. The house still stands. For sale again. A new coat of paint, fresh mulch in the flower beds. But don't ask about mirrors. There aren't any dot, and if you ever find one under the bed, leave it there dot and don't ever turn it over. He hadn't planned on booking a place in Austin. He'd meant to push through to San Antonio, maybe even all the way to Corpus if the caffeine held. But the storm came in hard, thick Texas rain that turned the highways into smudged mirrors and made the wipers useless. He pulled over outside a Whataburger somewhere near the south end of town, hands tight on the steering wheel, nerves frayed. He could still hear the slap of the water on the roof when he checked the Airbnb app. The listing was plain quiet stay just off I-35. Private, clean, keyless entry. A few photos, bed, sofa, kitchenette, and a short, polite description from the host. Not fancy, but safe and quiet. Let yourself in any time. The price was cheap. Suspiciously cheap. But the rain kept coming, and the lights in the Whataburger flickered once, like the whole strip. Mal was tired of standing upright. So he booked it, drove the 2 miles in a blur, and parked behind a squat. Sun-bleached one-story that looked more like a converted dentist office than someone's home. The code worked. The lock beeped once. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older underneath stale carpet or mothballs. The thermostat read 76. He lowered it to 70. The place was empty. Nothing on the walls. A little flat-screen TV sat dusty on a table. 1 fork, 1 spoon, 1 plate in the sink. He dumped his bag by the bed and kicked off his shoes. The rain had finally let up, but his head still throbbed. He took a lukewarm shower, tried the TV, it flickered static and Spanish soap operas, and lay down. That's when he noticed the sound, a dull, rhythmic thump, faint, infrequent, every 10, maybe 15 seconds. At first, he thought it was pipes, maybe the house settling, but it came from the far wall of the kitchen. He sat up and listened. Thump, thump, thump. He walked barefoot across the cold tile floor. The fridge was silent. The cabinets empty. But in the corner of the kitchen, wedged next to the back door and almost obscured by a leaning broom, was an old, industrial-style chest freezer. Beige, scratched, yellowed with age, and nailed shut. 3 thick nails hammered into the lid, rusty, and uneven, like someone had done it in a hurry. One of them bent halfway. He stood over it for a moment, expecting maybe to smell something meat gone bad, old fish. But there was no odor, just cold metal and dust. He walked away, turned off the kitchen light, told himself it was probably busted coils, some old machinery inside knocking around. He got halfway back to bed when his phone buzzed. A text. From the host. Don't open it. No greeting. No punctuation. Just those 3 words. The timestamp said it had been sent an hour ago, but somehow it had just delivered. Poor reception, maybe. He turned back toward the kitchen. The light was off, but now the freezer stood out in his mind like a tumor on a scan, silent but malignant. He didn't answer the text, didn't ask what they meant, just stared at the message until the screen dimmed and went black. He made it through the night. Slept badly, dreamed worse. A woman's voice humming something tuneless and low. Ice cracking. Wet footsteps on tile. He woke up at dawn, throat dry and ears ringing. He showered, packed, and left without touching anything. But he couldn't stop thinking about the freezer. He told himself not to care. Told himself he'd leave a review saying the place was fine, that the bed was comfortable, that the host was. quick to respond. But a week later, back home in Fort Worth, he was scrolling through his photos, just wasting time, trying not to think about the silence in his apartment, when he saw one he didn't remember taking. The freezer. Zoomed in. Flash reflecting off the nails. And in the corner of the frame, just barely visible, the pale suggestion of fingers curling up from beneath the lid. He stared at it for a long time. Then he called. Airbnb support. Waited on hold. Got disconnected. Called again. The woman on the other end was polite. Sighed she'd escalate the concern. That someone would look into it. 3 days later, the listing disappeared. Gone. As if it had never existed. He tried to forget. He really did, but the dreams got worse. The humming came back. He'd wake up in a cold sweat and swear he could hear thump. Thump from under his bed. He stopped sleeping. Stopped working. He lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks. Finally, desperate, he drove back to Austin. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't bring a bag, just his car, a crowbar, and a cheap motel reservation 2 miles from the old address. It wasn't there anymore. Where the one story had stood was now a leveled lot. Dirt and debris. A sign with city permitting numbers. Future construction site. He climbed the chain-link fence, boots crunching on splintered wood and broken tiles. No trace of the kitchen. No trace of the freezer. He found a patch of scorched earth behind where the kitchen had probably been. Black, like it had been burned. But the city logs showed no fire on record. That night, back in the motel, the text came again. Don't open it. This time, there was a photo attached of his front door in Fort Worth, taken at night, with something small and pale standing behind the frosted glass window, a shape hunched low, pressed against the glass, like it was waiting to be let in. The phone started buzzing. Call after call from a number with no name. He blocked it, tossed the phone in the motel toilet. But the humming came anyway. It lives in him now. He hears it when the fridge clicks on. He smells it when the AC blows cold. And every time he blinks too long, he swears he feels something knocking from the inside. Every night at exactly 2:09 a.m., she would wake to the sound. Not a bang, not a creak. Not even a moan that could be written off as the old house settling. It was a voice. A whisper. And it knew her name. Delilah. Soft, intentional, male. Maybe, or just old. Worn down like something that had been whispering for a very long time and only recently found someone willing to listen. The first time it happened, Delilah blamed the wind. It was mid-September, and Denton always got strange. Weather this time of year, one day blazing hot, the next cold enough to bite through her thin pajamas. She had moved into the old house on Bell Avenue 3 weeks ago, a rental she could afford on her grad school stipend, and while the floors sloped and the windows whined, it had charm. Trees heavy with Spanish moss drooped over the porch. A clawfoot tub sat in the middle of a crooked bathroom. The air had a faint smell of lavender and wood rot, but that first whisper made her freeze. She had sat up in bed, one foot tangled in her sheets, staring at the floorboards as if she could see through them. Nothing moved. The streetlights outside pooled pale orange light against the window. The ceiling fan spun in its lazy orbit. The house remained still. She almost convinced herself she'd dreamed it. But then it came again the next night. Delilah? Same. Time. 2:09. And closer. This time, she knew she was awake. She had been writing late notes for her thesis on Southern Gothic literature, and her laptop clock had just ticked past 2:08 when the voice came. Her name, drawn out softly like a song someone forgot the tune to. She jerked her head up from her notebook and listened. Silence. She got up and pressed her ear to the floor. Nothing. just the dull thrum of her own heart beating in her ears. But the next night, the voice came back, and this time she heard movement. A drag like fingernails, trailing against wood. Then a faint thump, like someone shifting their weight beneath the boards. She told her landlord, an old man named Harvey who ran a small pawn shop downtown and wore denim overalls like a costume. He scratched his bald head, frowned, and said, there hadn't been a crawl space under the house in decades. He sealed it up, he said. Back in '91, when he'd bought the place after the old woman died. Delilah asked what old woman, but he just waved her off. Just wind, he muttered. Wind does strange things in these parts, plays tricks. But Wind didn't know her name. The fourth night, she stayed awake deliberately. She made coffee at midnight, turned off every noise, TV, phone, fan, and waited. At 2:09, the voice came again, this time clearer, more urgent. Delilah. Let me out. She dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor. She didn't even notice until she stepped on a shard of it hours later. She couldn't sleep after that. Her eyes had sunk into her face, rimmed with sleepless purple. She tried blasting music through headphones, tried sleeping at friends' places. But somehow, every time she came back even in daylight, she'd feel something under her feet, a coldness. Like the house itself had developed a heartbeat that pulsed through the boards. When no one else was around, one afternoon she pulled up a floorboard in the corner of the bedroom. The wood was old but not rotted. The nails came out easy. Beneath it, darkness, a shallow cavity full of dust and dry air. She dropped a flashlight into it, but it clattered somewhere too far away to light anything. That didn't make sense. The space shouldn't be that deep. She told herself it was just an old vent system, or maybe the foundation had shifted and left pockets beneath the house. Maybe rats had tunneled out something down there. That explained the dragging sound. The whispering, she decided, was stress, or a neighbor. Maybe someone nearby was messing with her, but no one lived next door. One house had burned down in the '80s. The other had been foreclosed, gutted, and left empty. And the fifth night, she heard breathing, not her own. It came from beneath her bed. She stood frozen. The whisper didn't come, not that night. Just breathing, slow, rattling, wet. And something scraped fingernails or claws across the underside of her mattress. She didn't sleep at all. When the sun rose, she packed a bag and went to stay with a classmate, Sarah, who lived near the university. Delilah didn't tell her everything, just enough to explain the nightmares, the insomnia. Sarah let her sleep on the couch. That night, Delilah dreamed of dirt walls and fingernails broken to the quick scraping for air. When she woke up, the soles of her feet were black with soil dot. She returned to the house only once to collect the rest of her things. The whisper came before she'd even unlocked the door. Delilah. She dropped her keys. The voice didn't come from the house anymore. It was behind her. She turned and saw no one on the porch. No one in the yard, but the air around her had shifted. It was heavy, almost expectant. She turned the knob slowly, stepped inside, and the door slammed behind her without wind or reason. The house didn't smell like rot anymore. It smelled like something worse. Like old meat, like whetstone, like a grave that had been cracked open. She made it as far as the kitchen before the floor buckled beneath her. One moment she was standing. The next, she was on her knees, the boards soft and sagging. Then they split. She didn't fall into a crawl space. She fell into a pit dot. It wasn't supposed to be there. A narrow shaft of earth and broken stone stretched deep under the house. She scrambled out, hands bleeding, breath ragged. But she'd seen them. At the bottom, fingers, not bones, not illusions. Fingers, dozens of them, white and thin and twitching upward like worms seeking light. She ran. didn't stop running until she reached Sarah's door, barefoot and muddy, sobbing so hard her lungs hurt. She didn't go back after that, not to get the rest of her things, not to see the house once more. Sarah helped her find a new place, a little duplex on the other side of town. Clean, modern, carpeted. The nightmares didn't follow her. Not exactly, but every night at 2:09 a.m. she wakes up anyway, and sometimes when it's quiet, she thinks she hears her name again, but this time it's beneath the carpet. And the floor feels soft. The first time she saw it, she'd been living in the old rental on Briar Patch Road for 2 weeks. It was a craftsman-style place, small, wood-paneled, with sloping eaves and a screened porch that whined in the wind. The listing said charming, fixer-upper, but it should have said tired and hiding things. The house had 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and a door that led to nowhere. Maggie hadn't noticed the door during the walkthrough. Maybe the realtor hadn't taken her into the back hallway, or maybe she just hadn't looked hard enough. But there it was, tucked between the laundry closet and a narrow alcove where the wall curved weirdly, like the house had tried to grow around something. The door was the same faded beige as the walls. No trim, no knob, no hinges, just a rectangular seam in the drywall, smooth and dull like it had been painted over again and again. But what made her stop, really stop, wasn't the door. It was the mirror in the hall, a narrow antique hung beside it. She was just passing by, carrying laundry, when she glanced at the mirror. Her body moved on, but her reflection lingered a heartbeat too long. Like it had paused to look back at the door. She froze, turned, looked from the mirror to the door and back again. Nothing. It had to be a trick of the light. Maybe the old wiring made the bulbs flicker, or maybe the glass was warped. Still, her skin crawled. The next day, she pressed her palm flat to the door. Cool, slightly chalky. No give. She knocked 3 short raps. Nothing answered. No echo. No sound at all. It felt like knocking on a coffin. She asked the landlord about it in a casual text. Hey, what's up with the door in the back hallway? Doesn't seem to open. The reply came fast. That room doesn't unlock. She stared at the screen for a full minute, reading it. No explanation, no emoji. Just those 4 words. She replied with a question mark. Got no answer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful. Dead. Maggie had moved in after the divorce, wanting space. Somewhere the memories couldn't reach her. She didn't want noise, didn't want company. But there were times she'd catch herself turning on the TV just to fill the silence. And more than once, she thought she heard someone else breathing in the room with her when she lay in bed. Deep, steady, raspy. Not hers. And always from the direction of that hallway. 3 weeks in, she started dreaming about the door. In the dreams, it wasn't part of the wall anymore. It stood alone, floating in darkness. A bare, beige slab, still without a handle. Sometimes it opened in the dream. When it did, there was something behind it. A shape, not quite a person, not quite a shadow. Something tall and slow and smiling without lips. She started avoiding that part of the house, let laundry pile up. Never turned on the light in the hallway. She even covered the mirror with a towel. One night, but by morning the towel was crumpled on the floor, and the mirror was fogged with what looked like breath. She stopped sleeping well. Started smoking again. And then, one night, she made a mistake. She heard a noise just after midnight. A click. A dry, brittle sound like a fingernail tapping glass. Then a slow creak. Maggie sat up in bed, heart pounding, every hair on her. Arms standing. She waited. Then footsteps, not boots, not sneakers, bare feet, slapping softly on the hardwood. And they were coming from that hallway. She grabbed the flashlight from her nightstand and crept out, moving like someone walking. Into a trap. The house smelled like old earth, like mildew and rot. As she turned the corner toward the hallway, the flashlight flickered once. The door, the one that doesn't unlock, was open, just a few inches, but open. Inside was blackness. Not just unlit wrong. The kind of dark that pressed back. That felt full, like it was breathing. She stood there, frozen. As the air from the room rushed out, cold, damp, it smelled like soil that had never seen the sun. And then she saw her reflection again in the mirror. Only this time, it wasn't hers. It looked like her. Wore her flannel shirt, had her messy ponytail, but its eyes were wide. Too wide, black all the way through, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream that never ended. As Maggie watched, her reflection raised its hand and knocked 3 times on the other side of the mirror, then it smiled. She dropped the flashlight. It went out when it hit the floor, leaving her in the dark. Something moved inside the room. She didn't wait. She turned and ran, barefoot, slamming her shin on a low stool, nearly falling down the hallway. She didn't stop running until she was in her car, shivering in the driver's seat with the dome light on. She slept there, engine off, clutching her phone and watching the house through the windshield. The hallway light flicked on at 3:17 a.m., all by itself. By morning, the door was shut again, seamless. Still no knob. Still no hinges. She packed a few bags and stayed with a friend for a week, blaming the decision on stress. Told herself it was all in her head, but the dreams didn't stop. She tried going back once in daylight. Her key still worked. But the air inside was wrong. Heavy, like walking into a house that's been sealed too long. And as she stepped inside, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the hallway. Mirror. It didn't blink when she did. She turned around and left. Never went. Back a year later, she got curious. Looked up the address. No rental listings. No property history. It was like the house didn't exist anymore. Except for one thing. On a forum for urban exploration, someone had posted a blurry photo of a boarded-up house with a caption, "This place in Brazos County." Tried to get inside, but one of the back rooms won't open. No hinges, no knob, just feels wrong. Maggie stared at the screen for a long time. Then she closed her laptop. And in the reflection of the black screen, her eyes stayed open a little too long. The drive west from El Paso had always been quiet, but this time it was something else. Natalie pressed her palm flat to the inside of the windshield, eyes scanning the dry hills and distant outlines of barbed wire fences that stretched like veins through the dust. She and Aaron had left the city just before sunset, chasing the last gold ribbons of daylight along Route 20. They were supposed to stay at a small guest house on an old ranch someone at Aaron's office had recommended, real rustic. He'd sighed, perfect for getting off the grid. Natalie had nodded politely, but she wasn't interested in the usual influencer-style getaway. What sold her was the idea of stillness. No phones. No cars humming by. No boss emails at midnight. Just desert silence. But she hadn't expected this kind of silence. When they pulled up the gravel path to the main ranch house, her ears rang. There was no wind, not even the faintest hiss through the mesquite. No birds called from the brittle trees. No bugs hummed. No moths beat their wings against the porch light. The air pressed in on them like a vacuum, thick and waiting. Aaron didn't notice. He popped the trunk and grabbed their bags like they were checking into a Marriott, laughing about the retro vibes of the old stucco walls and the rusted weather vane perched on the roof. "This is gonna be fun," he said, nudging her with his elbow. But Natalie only nodded and walked slowly toward the porch, her shoes crunching dry earth that somehow didn't echo. The ranch house wasn't fancy, but it was intact, surprisingly so. A wraparound porch sagged at the edges, but the paint on the walls hadn't peeled. The screen door opened without a squeak. Inside, the living room was large and oddly symmetrical. 2 red velvet chairs facing a faded couch, a bookshelf lined with hardcovers nobody had touched in years, and in the far corner, a dusty wooden cabinet that held an old-fashioned record player. The air smelled like mothballs and something fainter beneath it, something metallic, like rust or old blood. Natalie wrinkled her nose, but Aaron just dropped his backpack and started exploring. The bedroom was small but clean. The kitchen was stocked with old cans and bottled water. No electricity, no Wi-Fi. Just kerosene lamps and gas burners and time. They ate cold beans and crackers for dinner, laughing about it like it was a campout, but Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Not in the haunted sense, not exactly. More like they were being watched by the house itself, or maybe by the air. It was still too still, and the silence wasn't peaceful, it was poised, like the quiet right before a scream. She tried to brush it off. They played cards, lit a lamp, talked about the things couples talk about when they're trying to remember who they used to be before jobs and stress and taxes. Aaron was sweet. He always was, even if he missed things, especially when she didn't want to say them out loud. Around midnight, they climbed into the narrow bed. Natalie laid awake long after he fell asleep, staring at the ceiling and listening to the nothing. And then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the record player in the living room began to spin. Not just the turntable it clicked on. The arm lifted on its own and lowered gently onto the black vinyl that neither of them had touched. The needle hissed once, then music began to pour from the old wooden speaker. A waltz. Scratchy, slow, and wrong. Natalie sat up. Her throat clenched, as if it knew before her brain did that something terrible was happening. She swung her legs over the bed and tiptoed into the living room, her heart hammering in the way it had once during a panic attack that sent her to the ER. She half expected to see Aaron there, maybe smiling, maybe pranking her, but he was still asleep, and she was alone. The chairs were empty. The air was ice cold. The music played on. Natalie approached the player. The record was spinning in perfect rhythm. The label had no writing on it, just a black circle. No title, no band, no nothing. Just that endless, creaking waltz, like it belonged to a time that had no clocks. She reached out to lift the arm and stop it. Before her fingers touched it, the record skipped just once, and the melody warped into something that sounded like a voice. It wasn't words, not at first. Just something close to them. Then came the whisper, buried under the strings. Natalie ... She recoiled. The player hissed and stopped. The room went silent. Her lungs burned, and she realized she'd been holding her breath. In the morning, Aaron didn't remember anything. Not the sound, not the music. He laughed when she told him and blamed a bad dream. Maybe it was. But Natalie checked the player. The record was gone. Not just not spinning. Gone. The cabinet was empty. That day the stillness thickened. The air seemed heavier. Every shadow clung to corners like it was afraid of light. Natalie felt eyes behind her, always just behind her. In the mirror above the sink, she caught her reflection lagging, a half-second off. When she blinked, it blinked late. That night, she tried not to sleep. But she drifted, and when she woke again, it was 3:33. The music was louder. She stayed in bed, rigid, staring at the door. Aaron didn't move. The music changed that time. It wasn't a waltz anymore. It was a march. Slow and funereal. Footsteps echoed between the notes. Then came the sound of something dragging. A chair leg, a chain, a foot. The door to the bedroom opened an inch. Natalie screamed, but no sound came. Her voice locked in her throat. The door opened wider. Something moved in the hall. The music stuttered, glitched, like a radio caught between stations, and then it stopped. Aaron woke, groggy, asking what was wrong. Natalie pointed at the door. It was closed. The next day, she demanded they leave. Aaron hesitated, but finally agreed. They packed in silence. Natalie didn't speak until the car was miles away. She didn't feel relief until she saw the city again, heard the distant buzz of traffic and the bark of a dog. Noise. Blessed. Human noise. But that night in their apartment, the air turned. Cold at 3:33, and something in the living room whispered her name. The bed was made, tucked so tight you'd think someone took a ruler to the corners. White sheets stretched over the mattress with crisp precision, the kind that only happens in hotels where no one stays or homes kept show-ready for buyers who never come. But it was the indent that got her. Faint, shallow, but there. A long human shape on the left side of the bed, like someone had been lying there not long ago and had just gotten up without disturbing the rest of the room. The right side was untouched. It always was. Carly wasn't supposed to be here. The house was empty. Her aunt had passed 6 months ago, the listing still active on Zillow but with no showing scheduled. The real estate agent, a tired woman with yellow-stained nails and thinning hair dyed the color of rust, had given her the keys on the promise she wouldn't touch anything. Just stay a few days, get her thoughts together, see if she wanted to keep the house or sell it off with the rest of the family junk. Carly had nowhere else to go. Houston was a mess. Her ex wouldn't stop calling. And there was something about the way the old place sat on that quiet road outside Fredericksburg, with its crooked mailbox and lopsided porch swing. That made her feel like maybe she could finally sleep without pills. But now she was standing at the doorway of the master bedroom, staring at that impression in the bed like it had something to say. Like it had been waiting. She didn't sleep in that room the first night. Couldn't. She dragged a blanket and a throw pillow onto the faded blue couch in the living room, pulled the curtains closed, and told herself it was just the lighting. Maybe the mattress had memory foam. Maybe it was just the way it settled. But the next morning, when she walked past the bedroom on her way to the kitchen, the bed looked exactly the same. Tight linens, smooth pillows, and that shape. Still there. She pressed her palm against it. Cold. Too cold. Not the natural chill of an old house in the hill country, but that kind of damp, heavy cold that settled into your skin and stayed. She didn't touch it again. That afternoon, she found herself staring out the front window. The swing moved, a fatin servingduvdama, little in the breeze, and she could see the edge of the field where the grass went from a clipped brown to a wild, untamed yellow. She thought about her aunt, about how she'd always kept the place spotless, even though nobody ever came by. No friends. No visitors. Just the occasional call from Carly's mother, long and stilted, filled with silences no one wanted to break. There were rumors, sure. Stories about her aunt going strange after the war. Something about voices in the walls. But Carly had never believed them. Until now, that night, the sound started out. At first, it was just the floor creaking. Houses did that, especially old ones with wood beams and decades of settling. But it wasn't random. It came in pairs. Step, step, pause, step, like someone walking slowly down the hallway. She lay frozen on the couch, her blanket pulled to her chin, the distant sound of those measured steps making their way toward the living room. She stared at the doorway. Nothing came through. The steps stopped. She didn't sleep at all. On the third night, she found the bedroom door closed. She hadn't touched it. In fact, she was sure she'd left it wide open to let light in during the day. But now it was shut. Latch clicked, and when she turned the knob, something on the other side resisted. Not locked, just heavy. Like someone was leaning against it. She pressed harder, and it gave way with a soft whoosh. The room was empty. The bed was made. The indent was deeper now. This time, the pillow had a slight dip. The kind your head leaves when you sleep for a few hours. Carly stared at, her pulse thudding in her ears. She didn't go in. Just shut the door again and went to the kitchen to make tea with trembling hands. She didn't even drink it. Just sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, listening. The steps came again around 2:11 a.m., not earlier. Not later. Always the same time. Always the same pattern. Step, step, pause, closer. She began checking the door every morning. Always the same. The bed was made. The outline unchanged or deeper. She couldn't be sure anymore. Her sleep deprived. Brain couldn't remember how far the dip went the day before. She stopped touching it. She stopped going inside. On the 6th day, she woke up on the couch with her blanket gone. Just gone. The throw pillow was still there, but the blanket had vanished. She found it later, folded neatly at the foot of the bed. And this time, the right side was rumpled. Carly sat on the floor of the hallway for almost an hour, staring at the open bedroom door. The linens were pristine. The shape still there, but now there were two. Faint outlines, side by side. She hadn't told anyone she was staying here. No one knew. No neighbors dropped by. No deliveries. Just her and whatever had made room for her in that bed. That night, she didn't sleep at all. Around 2:09 a.m., the temperature dropped. She could feel it coming before the steps started. The air turned thick and still, like the house was holding its breath. Step, step, pause, step, closer now. She gripped the edge of the couch, her nails digging into the worn fabric. The footsteps reached the living room. Silence. She didn't look. Couldn't, but she felt it. That thing. That presence. Watching her from just out of sight. Something touched her hair. Not hard. Not violent. Just a slow, deliberate tug, like fingers combing through it. She didn't scream. Didn't move. The next morning, the couch was bare. No blanket. No pillow. The bedroom door stood wide open. The bed had two deep, perfect impressions. And one of the pillows bore the clear shape of a cheek and jaw. Hers. She left that afternoon. Packed her bag, locked the door behind her, and dropped the key through the mail slot at the agent's office without saying a word. But she didn't go far. Just checked into a motel off Route 87. Figured she'd rest for a night. Figure things out in the morning. But when she pulled back the covers on the motel bed, the linens were too crisp. Too white. There were two faint outlines waiting for her. One on each side, and the pillow on the right already had the shape of her head. She booked the place on a whim, last-minute business trip, last-minute rental. Cheap, too, almost suspiciously so. But the photos looked fine. Modest two-bedroom bungalow just off Southtown in San Antonio, the kind of place that tried to lean into rustic charm with chipped white shutters and a welcome mat that said Mi Casa y Su Casa. The owner didn't meet her, just a code on the lockbox and a message. Enjoy your stay. Feel free to sign the guest book in the entry. That should have been her first clue. Elena arrived around 6:30 p.m. Sun still low, but heat still thick. Like wet cotton. She let herself in and was greeted by the unmistakable smell of an old house trying too hard, pine sol clinging to wooden floors. The ghost of mildew in the walls, maybe some overripe fruit that had been thrown out too late. The living room was neat but sparse. Couch with too many decorative pillows, an old floor lamp with one dim bulb, and a side table with a faded cloth runner and the guest book leather bound, worn smooth at the corners, the kind you'd expect to find in a New England B&B. Not a cheap Texas Airbnb. She almost didn't bother signing it. But she'd had a good day, secured the account, wrapped up the pitch early. Felt a bit sentimental. So she picked up the fountain pen beside it, odd choice, and wrote, in her casual cursive, "Nice day so far. Cozy house, thanks, Elena." M. The ink took a moment to dry, which she chalked up to old-school quirkiness. She closed the book, left it on the table, and went about settling in. Showered. Microwaved a frozen meal she'd grabbed from H-E-B. Answered a couple emails. Around 10, she pulled the thick curtains in the bedroom and crawled under the stiff white sheets. Air conditioning was noisy but did the job. Sleep came easily. She woke sometime around 3. Not to a sound exactly, just a feeling. Her heart was beating harder than it should have been. Room was too still. Outside, even the cicadas had gone silent. She got up, used the bathroom, drank a little water from the kitchen sink. Didn't even look toward the guest book. She just wanted sleep. That strange little jolt of unease faded by morning until she saw it. She was halfway out the door when she remembered she'd left her car keys on the entry table. She came back in, grabbed them, and noticed the guest book was open. That was odd. She distinctly remembered closing it. She glanced down, half distracted, then froze. Under her neat, friendly line of cursive, another message had appeared. Not printed, not typed, handwritten, slanted and uneven, like someone had written with their non-dominant hand. Or in the dark. I saw you sleep. Her mouth went dry. It wasn't just the words. It was how fresh the ink looked. Wet enough to smudge if she touched it, but she didn't dare. She stood there for a long minute, not breathing, eyes locked on that single line. Maybe the owner was messing around. Maybe some creepy prank for guests. But who the hell does that? Especially without a heads up. She grabbed her bag, double-checked the locks, and got the hell out of there. She thought that was it. That night, in her hotel room downtown, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Tried to laugh it off over dinner. Told a colleague, but spun. It like a joke. The guest book wrote back. San Antonio hospitality, right? They laughed, called it a glitch. Maybe a returning guest having fun. She smiled, nodded. Didn't sleep much. Next morning, her phone buzzed with a message from Airbnb. Thanks for staying. Feel free to leave a review. Hope you signed the guest book. She stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it, but curiosity, it's a hell of a drug. By mid-afternoon, she'd looked up the property again. Still listed, still cheap, still the same photos. She read the reviews this time. Most were normal. Short, bland. One or two said, weird vibe, but okay for a night. One mentioned creaking in the hallway. Another said, love the guest book idea, but none said anything like her experience. She went back, told herself it was just to satisfy the itch, just for closure. That she'd swing by during the day, grab a coffee from the cafe down the street, take a look at the place again from the outside. That would be enough. Except when she got there, she found herself on the porch again, and the lockbox still accepted her old code. That wasn't supposed to happen. A good host resets between guests. She stood in the entry again before she realized what she was doing. Same couch, same dusty air, same side table, same guest book, closed now, spine facing her like it had never moved. She should have left. Instead, she opened it. Her message was still there. So was the reply. And under it, something. New, don't leave again. She backed away, heart in her throat, hands suddenly cold. The air in the room felt different, thicker, like she'd stepped into the eye of a storm. Her instinct screamed. She turned to leave, and the door slammed shut before her hand touched it. No draft, no wind, Just the boom of old wood and a sudden click of the lock. She ran to it. Tried the knob. Nothing. Deadbolt engaged from the inside. That wasn't possible. She hadn't turned it. She hadn't even touched it. Behind her. The sound of the pen scratching across paper. She didn't want to look. Didn't want to know. But she turned. Anyway, the book was open again. The pen hovered mid-her, trembling in place like a violin string, ink dripping slowly from the tip as words carved themselves into the page. I said, "I saw you sleep." And beneath that, I never stopped. She screamed, loud and real, hoping. Someone nearby might hear, kicked at the door, slammed her shoulder into it. Nothing budged. The house groaned around her, floorboards expanding and contracting like breath. Then she heard it from the bedroom. That same rhythmic rasp of the AC unit, except it was off, a breath. Steady, in, out, close. She bolted down the hall, past the kitchen, looking for another exit. The back door didn't exist anymore. Just a blank wall where one had been. The windows wouldn't open. She could feel the house tightening, shrinking, closing in. Like it wanted to keep her there. Like it had done this before. Her phone had no signal. The guest book flipped again, dot another line. New ink, you came back. That means you want to stay. She finally lost it, then threw a chair through the front window. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and for a moment the silence broke. She climbed through, cutting her leg, tearing her shirt. Didn't stop, didn't look back. Ran into the street like a madwoman, flagged down a car, didn't explain. Just begged for a ride downtown. She never went back. But sometimes on nights, when the world is too quiet, Elena still dreams of that house. The sound of pages turning, the scratching of ink that never stops, flowing. And the last thing she saw before jumping through the window burned into her memory like fire. Her name, etched in the guest book one final time, underlined, Elena. M. Permanent guest. She booked the place because it looked cozy, rustic, and quiet, tucked away just outside Odessa, near the Permian Basin. The online listing had that blend of old charm and Texas loneliness she liked. 2 stories, red brick, creaky porch swing, a wide dusty yard that backed up into scrubland. A peaceful writer's retreat, it claimed. And that was all Harper really wanted after what happened in Austin, a place to forget, to breathe, and maybe finish the manuscript she'd been dragging behind her like a corpse for a year and a half. The host was an older woman named Mira, polite but clipped on the phone. The keys'll be in the box by the door. Codes your check-in date backwards. Wi-Fi's a little spotty. And just be mindful of the back stairwell. Sometimes the bottom door doesn't latch properly. Back stairwell. Harper didn't think much of it. Houses like this usually had all kinds of little quirks. That was part of the charm. The uneven flooring, the slightly slanted kitchen, the way the wind crept through thin walls and whispered at night. It all made her feel more like herself, like the version of her that used to believe ghosts were metaphors and solitude was freedom. She arrived just past dusk. Odessa's sky looked like it had been lit from beneath with flame, the red and gold, pooling low along the horizon as she pulled up the gravel path. The house stood still, as if waiting, its windows dim with that bruised tint of age, the wood steps groaning as she climbed them. The place smelled like cedar and thyme. Dust motes swirled in the hallway like they had nowhere better to be. She walked through the front room, dropped her bag near the couch, and went straight to the kitchen. Mira had left a welcome note and a jar of homemade peach preserves. She wandered a little after that. The downstairs had a small den, kitchen, bathroom, and what looked like a converted sunroom that led to the back door. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms, one with pale floral wallpaper that looked older than her parents' wedding photos, The other slightly darker, with a narrow window that faced west. That's the one she chose. She didn't notice the stairwell right away. Not until her second night. She'd been sleeping uneasily, tossing between dreams she couldn't hold on to and waking to a silence that felt wrong. Odessa was quiet. Sure, but this house felt too still. Like it was holding its breath. She got up sometime past 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. That's when she heard it creaking. Footsteps, not above her. Below. It stopped her cold. She was on the second floor. There was no floor below her, just the ground floor. She stood there in the hallway, heart picking up speed, ears straining in the kind of quiet that rings. She waited. Nothing. Next morning, she checked every inch of the house. She walked through the downstairs again, checked behind doors and closets, pressed against the wall paneling like she was in some gothic mystery. Finally, she found the stairwell. It was behind a plain white door near the pantry, half hidden in the dark corner of the kitchen. She hadn't noticed it before because the door was flush with the wall and painted the same color. It wasn't locked. The stairs were wooden, steep, and narrow. They led down to a dusty cellar. It looked like any other. Stone walls, concrete. Floor, a couple old wooden shelves with canning jars and toolboxes. A pull-chain bulb hung from the ceiling, casting the kind of light that left more shadow than clarity. Harper felt a bit silly. Of course there was a basement. She must have missed it in the listing. Or maybe Myra had said something about it and she just hadn't paid attention. She went back up, shut the door, and went about her day. But that night, the footsteps came. Again. This time, they started around 1:30. Not loud, but definite. The sound of someone stepping softly, slow, deliberate creaks, as if whoever was down there didn't want to wake her, but needed to come up. Harper sat up in bed, heart thudding. She stared at her bedroom door, willing it not to move. The creaking paused. Then another, closer. Up the stairs. She grabbed the baseball bat she kept by the bed, a habit from living in worse neighborhoods, and crept down the hall. The house was dark except for the moonlight leaking through the windows. Every step made her skin tighten. When she reached the kitchen, she stood still. The air felt heavy, charged like right before a storm. She pressed her ear to the stairwell. Door. Silence. She flung the door open, bat ready. Nothing. Just the dark stairwell and the smell of damp earth. She clicked on the bulb. Still nothing. She left the door open that night, daring whatever was down there to come up where she could. See it. Nothing did, but the next morning, something was different. When she went down to check the basement again, just to prove to herself that she was being ridiculous, she counted the stairs. 13 steps. But they felt wrong. The last 3 were tighter. The air was colder, and there was a second door at the back wall. It hadn't been there. Before. It was old, almost part of the wall. Wooden, gray with age, and with a small metal handle worn slick. She didn't open it. Not that day. Not that week. But the footsteps didn't stop. They came every night. Closer. Slower. Sometimes, she thought, she heard breathing. Not the kind you'd hear in your own head. This was heavier. Wet, like someone choking on water just out of reach. Once, she woke up and found the stairwell door open. She never left it open anymore. Another time, she came down in the morning and found muddy footprints leading from the stairwell to the sink. On the 11th night, she cracked. She waited at the top of the stairs, heart battering against her ribs, and yelled into the dark, "What do you want?" Nothing. Then, a voice, faint, croaking, from deep beneath the floor. Finish what she started. Harper slammed the door and locked it. The next day, she called Mira. "Mira," she said, trying to keep the panic from her voice, "you didn't mention a second basement, or that someone might be down there." The line went quiet. Then Mira sighed long and low. "There." Shouldn't be a second door, she said. If you found one ... don't open it. Too late, Harper said. Then get out. Harper didn't wait. She grabbed her laptop, charger, and bag, and booked a hotel on the edge of town. But something followed. Even now, in the sterile hotel room, the floor creaks at 1:30 a.m., even now. The carpet smells faintly of wet earth. And last night, when she opened the mini fridge, there was a peach preserve jar inside half empty, spoon still in it. She didn't bring it. She tried to leave. Odessa this morning. She packed up, got in her car, turned the key only to find a note taped to the inside of her windshield. It said, "You went too far down. Now you're part of it. She's checking out tonight." Not from the hotel, from everything. She's tired. The footsteps are getting louder, and she swears when she looked in the mirror this morning, the woman staring back wasn't her. The eyes were hers. But the mouth? It was still chewing something. It started with a slow drain. Just a sluggish gurgle under the water like a throat trying to clear itself. Becca figured it was just build-up soap scum. Maybe her own hair. Maybe those ridiculous bath bombs she bought from the Target off I-40. That promised lavender serenity, but left oily rings and pastel foam like a cartoon crime scene. She was new to Amarillo, barely a week into her lease at the Rio Mesa Apartments, Unit 2B. It wasn't glamorous, but it was close to her new job at the orthopedic clinic, and it had a working stove, a solid lock on the door, and a deep tub with those silver clawfoot fixtures she'd always loved in photos. She didn't call maintenance right away. Figured it could wait. She tried plunging the drain, even poured in one of those fizzing powders that promised to eat through the gunk like a piranha. The water just sat there, swirling slowly, backing up until her feet were soaking in a tepid puddle by the time she finished showering. The smell was the next thing. The mildew scent got heavier. She cleaned the tiles twice, scrubbed the corners, dumped a full bottle of bleach down the pipe. Still, it lingered, like old breath coming up from somewhere deep. Then came the hair. It wasn't hers. That was the first thing she noticed. Becca had red curls, wild and unmistakable. But what she pulled from the drain one morning after noticing the water had gone completely stagnant was dark, straight, and coarse, almost wiry. She tugged at it with tissue, flinching at how long the clump was. It kept coming, inches at a time, like some grotesque magician's scarf. When it finally came free with a slurp, she gagged. That's when she saw the tooth tangled in the strands. It wasn't a child's tooth either. It was adult-sized, yellowed at the root, and still bloody at the root's end, as if it had been yanked from a living mouth just moments before. Becca dropped it in the sink and ran. She stood outside on her small balcony, shaking, air sticking to her damp skin as the hot panhandle wind rolled through like breath from a furnace. Her neighbors were quiet, always were. A retired couple lived across the hall, a silent man named Jorge above her. No one seemed to notice anything strange. Just another hot Texas summer day. Becca called maintenance. Left a message. No one came that day. That night, she lay in bed with the bathroom door cracked open. The light was off, but she could hear the faintest sound, water sloshing. Just faint, rhythmic. Like something paddling gently in the tub. The next morning, the drain was empty again. Clean, even. No standing water, no smell. The tooth was gone from the sink. She didn't remember tossing it. She wasn't sure if she dreamed the whole thing, but when she took her shower that night, she felt it. Sensation that made her blood ice over. The water ran fine, and she was halfway through rinsing her hair when something brushed her foot. Something solid. She screamed, slipping against the tile as she jumped out of the tub, grabbing a towel more for armor than modesty. She stared. At the drain, Hard hammering. Nothing. She forced herself back in. Told herself it was shampoo bottle she'd knocked over, even though there was none in the tub. Even though she swore she'd felt fingers, later that week she came home to find her doormat moved. Just slightly, a few inches to the left. Then her shower curtain was pulled shut. She never left it that way. And there were small wet footprints on the tile, barefoot, child-sized. She stared at them for a long time, then wiped them up. Told herself someone was playing a prank. That maybe the guy upstairs had a key. Or the super. She changed the locks the next day, but it didn't stop. At night, she'd hear the water turn on. Just a trickle. Not enough to trip the meter. She'd check, find nothing, go back to bed. And always, just before sleep took her, she'd hear the clink, the sound of something hard and small rolling across porcelain, like a marble. Or a tooth. She called the front office again. This time, a woman picked up. Young voice, flat. "We'll send someone by. Something's in my drain." Becca said. Silence. Double quotes. "Ma'am, you're in 2B, right?" The girl said finally, "You should probably keep your plug in. Just in case." Becca blinked. "What?" The girl hung up. No one came. That night, Becca stuffed a rubber stopper into the drain. She even put a heavy shampoo bottle on top of it. Just in case. Sleep was a joke now. She stayed up late watching reruns of sitcoms, volume low, lights on. Just enough to keep the darkness from pressing in. At 3:13 a.m., she heard it. The pop of the rubber stopper being pushed out. Then the slow gurgle. She crept to the bathroom. It was steaming inside, but she hadn't run the hot water. The mirror was fogged. She stepped closer and wiped it. Behind her, in the mirror's edge, something was rising in the tub. She didn't turn. Couldn't. Its fingers were too long. They wrapped around the rim of the tub like they'd done it before. Skin gray and pitted, like it had been submerged too long. Hair clung to its head in patches. It had no eyes, just sockets. But she knew it was staring at her. She screamed, slammed the bathroom door, and shoved a chair under the knob. Called 911, shaking. By the time the police arrived, there was nothing in the tub. No prints, no smell. Just a bone-dry drain and a fogged mirror. They didn't believe her. Gave her the number of a crisis counselor. She didn't sleep for 2 days. On the third day, she packed. Called a friend in Lubbock. She was getting out, but the drain had other plans. When she went to the bathroom to pee before her trip, the door was ajar again, and from inside, she heard it. That sloshing. That low moan of water pushing back against something coming through. She backed away. Too late. The drain exploded upward in a geyser of water and hair, and something slid out of it limp, slick, shuddering onto the tile like a fetus born wrong. It wasn't just a person. It was parts. A woman's torso. A child's arm. An eye blinked open in the mess. Teeth too many, too sharp, grinned up at her from within the hair. And it spoke, not with a voice. With a noise like the gurgle of a dying throat, shaped into something like her name. Becca. She ran. Left everything. Moved in with her sister. Never looked back. A month later, she called Rio Mesa Apartments from a blocked number. Just to see. "Yeah, someone's in 2B, the girl on the phone said. "Young guy, I think." First day he moved in, he asked about the drain. Becca didn't say anything. The girl on the phone laughed. "Not nicely. They always ask about the drain," she said. "But they don't leave." The line clicked dead. Becca never called again. But every now and then, when the pipes in her new place rattle and the shower takes too long to drain, she feels it again. That brush of fingers on her ankle, and she wonders if the thing followed her, or if something else is waiting. The listing was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Lila had been scrolling through Airbnb options late one night while sipping lukewarm chamomile tea, the kind that tastes faintly of guilt and exhaustion. She was looking for a last-minute escape from Austin. Houston, something quiet, remote, and cheap. Something that wouldn't ask questions. The listing popped up like it had been waiting for her. Modern retreat in hill country, entire cabin to one guest max. No reviews, no host photo. But the price was a steal, and the photos? Immaculate. Clean lines, soft lighting, big windows. That looked out into a thick screen of pine and cedar. A small reading nook, a clawfoot tub. And most importantly, total solitude. The instructions were instant once she booked, a code to get in, where to park, how to use the smart lights, and the line, "Your host is always just a message away." Every reply she sent was met with a fast, robotic politeness. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late October, just when the air in Texas begins to taste faintly of wood smoke and decay. The cabin sat on the edge of a private stretch of land, an hour west of Kerrville, surrounded by hills and trees too dense to see through. No nearby homes, no passing cars. A gravel path led to a wooden porch where a security camera blinked once and then went dark. The door opened with a beep as she punched in the code. Cool air greeted her. Inside smelled like cedarwood and something older, something that reminded her of abandoned churches or antique stores, places where people's stories stayed behind in the walls. Lila unpacked slowly, taking in the space. There was no TV, just a Bluetooth speaker and a bookshelf stocked with dusty novels and old travel guides. The lights adjusted automatically as she moved, a soft orange glow trailing her like a polite ghost. At first, it was comforting, peaceful. Even the silence felt curated. She settled into her first night with a paperback and a glass of wine. Around 10, the house dimmed to evening mode without her asking, and soft music started playing in the kitchen, a faint instrumental version of Unchained Melody. She didn't remember selecting anything, but figured it must have been programmed. A thoughtful touch, she told herself. She turned it off before bed. The cabin had a single bedroom with a king-size bed that felt barely used. The linens were crisp and cool. She lay there, staring at the wood beams above her, the silence pressing down like a weighted blanket. Then the text came in. "Good night, Layla. Let me know if you need anything." She blinked at the screen. The Airbnb app. From the host, but she hadn't messaged since checking in. She hadn't even mentioned her name in any message. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "Thanks. All good here." The reply came 2 seconds later. "Of course. I'm always nearby." She felt something cold slide through her chest. That was the word nearby. Not available, not online. Nearby. She slept poorly that night, kept waking to the sound of something faint and mechanical like a fan clicking on, or a phone charger being plugged in and out over and over again. She'd get up, check her devices, walk through the main room. Nothing ever changed, but the air felt subtly different, as if something had been disturbed. The next morning, the front door was ajar. She stood staring at it, heart pounding, coffee untouched on the counter. The cabin had been locked. She was sure of it. She checked the bolt before going to bed. The outdoor camera? Dead. She tried rebooting it through the tablet provided on the entry table. The tablet didn't turn on. She messaged the host. "Hey, door was open this morning. Any idea why?" 30 seconds passed. "Sometimes the wind catches it. Apologies for the scare. Everything is fine." She typed, "Does this place have a caretaker or someone nearby?" No reply. She tried again, twice more that morning. The app showed delivered, but no response. Her stomach roiled. Lila spent the day walking the perimeter of the land, finding nothing but dry brush and silence. When she returned, the lights were already on, glowing warmly. Her wine glass was in the sink. She had left it on the coffee table. She stood still, backpack still strapped to her shoulders. Her breathing grew loud, controlled. She didn't drink last night. She remembered everything. She didn't even finish the wine. She went back to the app. Still nothing from the host. She scrolled through the listing. Now the photos looked off. One of the windows in the bedroom was slightly cracked in the photo. The same one she swore had been shut and locked when she got there. Another photo showed the front porch, but there was something just barely visible through the reflection on the glass door. A figure. A man in dark clothes. Eyes bright like the lens flare of a camera. She dropped her phone. It thudded against the floorboards. The lights flickered. At 11:13 p.m., as she sat wrapped in a throw blanket by the fireplace, trying not to cry, someone knocked. 3 sharp, deliberate raps on the front door. She didn't move. Her phone was charging in the other room. It kept vibrating, message after message, all from the app. She forced herself to stand and walk slowly toward the front door. The knocking had stopped, but the porch light was on. When she peeked through the window, she saw a man standing there. Average height, middle-aged, dressed neatly, gray windbreaker, jeans, baseball cap. He held nothing in his hands. His face was completely still. Then he smiled and spoke, though the glass muffled it. "You called me." She stepped back like she'd been hit. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just stood there, calm, like a plumber arriving for a scheduled visit, like a friend answering a dinner invitation. "You called me," he said again. "You asked for help." "No," she whispered. "Your host told me," he said, and that's when she realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. He believed it. Believed he'd been summoned by someone or something. She slammed the door's deadbolt shut, backed away, and called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher promised to send a unit. She waited in the bedroom, shaking, knife in hand. No one ever came. The next morning, her car wouldn't start. The tires had been slashed. All 4. No footprints. No mud tracked on the porch. No signs of forced entry. Just her, a cold cabin, and a dead phone battery. The only thing that worked was the house's own system. The lights, the music, and the messages. She opened the tablet, now mysteriously working, and found an interface she hadn't seen before. Dozens of conversations, all from different users. Different names, same cabin. Same host. Each one ended the same way. "Someone knocked last night. Said I called them." She booked a ride with a passing UPS driver who agreed to take her to the Chichu to the Mus. Next town over. She never looked back. Never filed a complaint. Because when she opened the app again to leave a review, the listing was gone. Erased. No record of her booking. No credit card charge. Nothing. It was like she had never stayed there. But late at night, sometimes when she's drifting off, her phone lights up. A notification from an app she swears she deleted. And it always says the same thing: your host is nearby. The lake was calm that night, still as polished slate, the kind of quiet only found in places far from highways and cities and cell towers. It was late September, a little past midnight, and the air carried that shift between the tail end of summer and the first breath of fall, warm enough to stand outside without a jacket, but with a whisper of something colder waiting in the wings. The house at the edge of Waco Lake was one of those listings that looked too good to be true. Old wood siding but freshly stained. Big wraparound porch, pine trees flanking both sides like quiet sentinels. There were no neighbors close enough to see, and that was the point. Ava and her husband Dean had booked it for 3 nights. Anniversary trip. They weren't even from Texas. Not really. Ava had grown up in Flagstaff, Dean in upstate New York, but they'd moved to Dallas for his job, and when she found the place on a random Tuesday night while browsing Airbnb, it felt like a sign. Something about the photos had tugged at her. The reflection in the lake had looked deeper than it should have, not clearer, not more mirror-like, just different. She couldn't explain it, and she didn't try to. They needed the break. They'd arrived Friday afternoon in a rental car, brought groceries, a few bottles of wine, and some vague ideas about fishing, reading, and pretending the world wasn't falling apart. The road into the property was gravel for the last 2 miles, flanked by woods that thickened the closer you got. Dean had cursed when his tire hit a sharp rock and the pressure warning light came on. Ava had laughed it off. She was in a good mood then. The house had charm. The porch was wide and creaky, the kind of place you could sit and drink coffee while watching fog rise from the lake. And the lake. God, it was beautiful. The first odd thing happened just after sunset. Dean was inside, trying to get the ancient TV to stream anything, and Ava stood alone by the edge of the dock, barefoot, staring down into the black water. The lake was calm, not a ripple. She could see her own silhouette clearly, along with the trees behind her and the house lit from inside. But something was off. The sky overhead was still fading into dark blues and purples, the moon not yet risen, but the reflection in the water was already full black and dotted with stars, different stars. She didn't know how she knew. She wasn't. An astronomer had never paid much attention beyond Orion's belt and maybe the Big Dipper on a good night. But the stars in the lake didn't line up. They blinked in clusters she didn't recognize, in constellations too orderly, too symmetrical. And worse, there were 2 moons reflected in the water. Side by side, one full, the other a thin sliver, both hanging over where the trees should have cut them off. She blinked, shook her head. It was just the angle. Maybe some optical trick. She told herself that and backed away from the edge. Inside, Dean had given up on the TV and found an old stereo. He played a lo-fi playlist Ava hated, but they danced anyway, opened a bottle of wine, and slept early, tangled up under thick quilts that smelled faintly of cedar. The second night was when the noises started. It had rained during the day. Soft and steady, enough to leave the porch damp and the grass soggy. They stayed inside, played board games, and cooked pasta. That night, Ava woke at 3:17 a.m. and didn't know why. The room was cold, colder than it should have been. She rolled over to reach for Dean, but he wasn't there. She sat up, blinked into the dark, and heard the sound of footsteps upstairs. That would have made sense if the house had an upstairs. She waited. The footsteps went on, slow, deliberate, from one end of the ceiling to the other, then back again, then silence. She turned on the lamp. Nothing happened. No light. She tried her phone. Dead. Dean's 2. She got out of bed, called out for him, but her voice felt swallowed by the air. The hallway was pitch black. She followed it to the living room, saw the door to the porch wide open, and just past it, Dean's figure sitting on the edge of the dock, still, as if frozen. She walked barefoot across the porch, careful not to slip. As she got closer, she called his name. He didn't move. Only when she touched his shoulder did he finally speak. "They're not looking at us," he said quietly. "Not yet." She crouched down in front of him. "What? What are you talking about?" Dean looked pale, lips blue, like he'd been out there a long time. He motioned toward the lake. The sky above them was cloudy now, low gray clouds rolling across the stars. But the lake was perfectly clear, smooth as ever, and the reflection? It showed a sky full of stars, dozens, hundreds, pinpricks of light in every direction, and in the center shapes. Tall, thin, angular, like silhouettes of people. But wrong. Like if someone described a human form to a blind sculptor. All joints and sharp elbows and two long limbs. They were standing on the other side of the lake. Only there was no other side. The lake in real life had a far shore, a line of trees. But the lake's reflection showed a flat expanse of black. Water stretching endlessly into the distance. And the figures stood still in it, watching, waiting. Dean's breath came out in fog. "I saw them last night," he whispered. "In a dream, I think. They were closer then." Ava looked again. The figures hadn't moved, but the stars above them had shifted. She stood, took Dean's hand, and pulled him back toward the house. He resisted at first, like a sleepwalker, but followed. They locked the doors, closed the curtains, and sat in the kitchen with all the lights on, what few still worked, until dawn. The final night, Ava begged to leave. Dean wouldn't. Not because he didn't want to. Because the car wouldn't start. Battery dead. No cell service. The landline inside the house had no dial tone. Every escape route choked by silence. That evening, they didn't cook. They didn't eat. They sat by the fireplace, which they'd lit out of desperation. Ava tried to read. Dean stared at the flames. UNMOVING. When the wind began to howl outside, though no trees moved, she knew it was time. They went upstairs. The house had no upstairs. But now it did. The stairs curved like a spine, each step creaking not under. Their feet, but from above, like something was walking downward while they walked up. The walls on either side were narrow, too narrow, and the air smelled of wet ash and copper dot at the top. The hallway stretched longer than the house should have allowed. Doors lined the walls, all shut, all identical. At the end, a window. Number. Glass. Just a square of open night dot, and through it, the lake. Still, black, and the sky above it, the wrong sky. Dean stepped closer. His face changed. His eyes lost focus. "They've been waiting for us," he said softly. Ava grabbed his arm, but he didn't react. The figures were closer now, no longer across the lake. They stood in the yard. In the reflection only. The real world showed grass and porch steps. The reflection showed shifting shadows, elongated heads, mouths like cracks in stone. One of them raised an arm. So did Dean. Ava screamed. She ran. Down the stairs that didn't belong. Through the living room. Into the night. She didn't stop. Until the trees swallowed her. She didn't look back. Not until morning. When the sheriff found her, barefoot, shivering in the ditch off County Road 306. She couldn't speak for an hour. The house? Gone. No record of it ever being there. No foundation. No porch. No dock. No. Dean. Only the lake. Still. Black dot, and if you stand at the edge just after midnight, you might still see it. The reflection of a house that isn't there, and stars that don't belong to this world. The house was a narrow two-story craftsman tucked away on a quiet cul-de-sac in Gainesville, Texas, off Highway 82, past the overgrown lots and half-flooded creeks. You'd find the street like a splinter of the past lodged into the town's edge. Maple Lane was its name, but it hadn't seen a blooming maple in years. Just a row of sagging houses wrapped in silence, windows dull with age, porches held together by rusted nails and spider silk. Lavra thought it was charming in the online listing. Peaceful, the caption read. Perfect for writers. Month's escape was all she wanted. Quiet, space to think. A place where no one expected anything of her. She met the old couple next door the day she moved in. They were already on their porch when she pulled up in her Civic, like they'd been waiting. He wore pressed slacks and suspenders, face brown and leathery like dried fruit. She sat stiff in a wicker chair, hands on her lap, hair in tight white curls. They both stared too long before introducing themselves as the Yoders. "Warren and Ruth. You picked this house?" Warren asked, slow drawl thick as honey left too long in the sun. "It's just a rental," Laura smiled, shifting a box onto her hip. "I needed somewhere quiet." Ruth's eyes tightened. "Quiet's not always peaceful." Warren coughed, a wet rattle in his chest, then muttered, "You're upstairs, aren't you?" Laura hesitated. "Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-bedroom. I figured I'd use the bigger room." "She never left that room," Ruth said flatly, her voice low and clipped like it hurt to speak. Laura blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Last tenant," Warren explained, tapping his knee. "Young girl like you. Stayed 1 week, maybe 2. Then one night, she just didn't come out. Her car sat there a month after the police gave up. Her folks came, cleared it all, but the room's still hers." Laura laughed nervously, half expecting them to crack a grin, but they didn't, not even a twitch. She told herself they were just trying to scare her. Old people with nothing better to do than gossip and lean into weird stories. She smiled, thanked them, and carried the box inside. The house creaked with the personality of 100 years. Wooden floors that sighed under each step. A staircase that groaned like it hated being walked. It smelled like lemon cleaner and something older beneath it, something like dried flowers and stale breath. The upstairs room was lovely. Bigger than it looked in pictures. A wide window that faced the street, a tall armoire, and pale blue walls that caught the late afternoon light just right. She set up her writing desk by the window and laid the cheap cotton comforter on the twin bed. She didn't notice anything strange the first night, just the usual settling sounds. Water in the pipes, shifting boards. A whine from the radiator when the temperature dropped. But around 3 a.m., she heard something from the closet. Not a bang or a creak, just soft, rhythmic. Like someone breathing too hard, too slow. She got up, heart pounding but telling herself it was nothing. The closet door was old warped wood with a keyhole and no key. She grabbed the knob and pulled. It didn't budge. She tried again, harder, and it gave a stubborn creak but stayed mostly shut. It wasn't stuck. It felt held. Probably painted over too many times, she muttered, crawling back into bed. The next night it was different. She'd been writing most of the day, trying to push through a mental block. The story just wouldn't come, and her head throbbed with the pressure of it. She made dinner, walked around the block, and finally gave up and went to bed. That's when she heard it again. A sound that wasn't just breathing. This time, it was weeping. The kind of crying that doesn't care who hears. Shaky, wounded, ugly sobs from deep in someone's throat. Laura sat up in bed, frozen, not even breathing herself. The sound came from the closet again, just behind the door. She stared at it, every inch of her body telling her not to move. It went on for several minutes, then stopped suddenly. The silence after was worse. She didn't sleep. The next morning she went to the Yoder's porch. "You?" "Said she never left," Laura said, arms crossed, eyes burning with sleepless tension. "What did you mean by that?" Warren looked away. Ruth leaned forward. "They found nothing," she said. "No body, no signs of struggle. Just her suitcase, some scribbles on the wall, and the closet locked from the inside. She was there." Warren muttered. You could hear her some nights, crying, talking, whispering like she didn't know she was dead. Laura scoffed. "I don't believe in ghosts." "Doesn't matter," Ruth said. "She believes in you." That night, Laura poured herself half a bottle of wine and forced herself into bed. She left the light on and faced the closet. The knob looked darker somehow, older than before. The paint around it cracked like dry skin. She closed her eyes, Just past 3 a.m., the weeping started again. This time it was louder, more desperate. Then came a whisper, muffled and broken. Please ... let me out. Laura said bold upright ... double quotes please ... let me out ... hurts. I didn't mean to ... please. Her throat tightened. Her legs refused to move. The closet knob turned ... just once. A slow, deliberate rotation that stopped halfway. Laura stumbled out of bed and ran down the stairs, grabbing her keys and shoving her feet into the wrong shoes. She sat in her car until dawn, hands shaking, eyes on the upstairs window. It remained dark the whole time. She considered leaving, packing everything and vanishing like the girl before her. But she'd already paid for the month, and some stubborn part of her wanted to know the truth. So the next day, she came back inside and went upstairs. The closet was still closed. She stood in front of it, pressed her ear to the wood ... nothing . She went to the hardware store and bought a crowbar. That night, just before the weeping began, she wedged it into the seam and yanked hard. The door cracked open with a sound like splintering bone. Dust spilled out in a lazy cloud. Inside, the closet was wrong. It was deeper than it should have been. Way deeper. A narrow hallway stretched into blackness, its floor sloping downward, the walls tight and claustrophobic. The air that came out was cold, wet, and smelled of mold and old perfume. And in the dark, something moved. She couldn't see it, but she felt it, something crawling just out of reach, something with fingers and grief and sharp gnashing teeth. That whispered in a child's voice, "Will you stay with me?" Lavra slammed the door and dragged her dresser in front of it. But the house had changed. From that night on. The hallway was always there. The air in the room got colder. Her laptop screen flickered and typed by itself. Words like "don't go" and "I'm still here" appeared in her documents. Her mirror showed someone behind her who wasn't there when she turned. The last straw came when she found her own name carved inside the closet, etched in long, ragged lines across the wood. Beneath it, a date, July 5th, 2025. The day she opened the door. She left that same night. Didn't pack, didn't lock up. She just ran. The house is still there. The upstairs window stays dark. The odors still sit on their porch, watching. And every once in a while, they'll see a light flicker behind the curtains, then a shadow. Then hear the crying, because she never left. She swore she just blinked. That was it. One blink, no longer than any other, and the soft light coming through the curtains hadn't changed. Her tea on the knitstand was still steaming, still carrying the faint scent of hibiscus and mint. Her fingers were still resting on the edge of the book she hadn't started reading yet. The house, the little cottage just outside Killeen she'd rented for a week of solitude, was silent. No footsteps, no voices, no wind brushing the glass. Just a blink. But when she looked back down at her phone, the time had jumped forward 3 hours and 16 minutes. Her heart didn't race, not at first. There was a strange kind of logic to it. She thought maybe she'd nodded off. Maybe her body just shut down for a nap without asking. It had been a long week, a long month, actually. She'd needed this break from Austin, from the steady hum of obligation and noise and the people who always needed something. She wanted a place where time didn't matter, but not like this. Not like something had been stolen without her noticing. The closet door was open. That hit her slower than the time jump. It was one of those old farmhouse-style doors, too narrow and a little warped, stuck in the frame when she'd tried it last night. It had taken both hands and a solid yank just to peek inside, only to find nothing but an old iron rod and a few moth-eaten hangers. She hadn't touched it since. She'd left it closed and now it was open. Not wide, just enough to show the darkness behind it. and the edge of one of the hangers swinging ever so slightly like it had just been bumped. She got up, legs stiff like she'd been sitting longer than she thought, and crossed the floor barefoot. The wood was cool beneath her feet, creaking under her weight, not enough to startle but enough to remind her how old this place really was. The cottage had been listed as historic on the site, a cute euphemism for old and possibly falling apart, but the bones of it were solid. The furniture was antique but well kept, and there hadn't been a single bad review, not one. The last guest just wrote, "Peaceful stay, lost track of time, would return." That didn't strike her as strange until now. She reached the closet and stood in front of it. The air coming from inside was cooler, almost damp, and it smelled like rain even though the forecast had been bone dry all week. She touched the edge of the door. It moved slightly under her fingers, as if someone on the other side had their hand on it too. She told herself to breathe, to stop imagining things, to stop letting her overworked brain invent nonsense. Just because she was finally quiet, enough to notice her thoughts, she opened the door wider. The closet was deeper than she remembered. The rods stretched farther back, and there were more hangers now, at least 10 some holding coats that hadn't been there before. Thick wool, dark and dusty. They looked like they belonged to another century. Behind them was just shadow. A dense, consuming shadow that didn't move with the light coming in from the window. She shut the door and went back to her phone. 3:19 p.m., she opened the camera and snapped a picture of the closet. The image froze on the screen and she didn't see anything unusual, except the coats weren't there. In the photo, the closet was empty. Just the rod. Just the hangers. Her tea was cold now. She left the room, went into the kitchen to heat some water, something to do with her hands. She checked the time on the microwave. 12:03 p.m., she blinked again. Checked her phone. 3:21 p.m., that was when she knew something wasn't right. Either her phone was malfunctioning in a very specific selective way, or this place was playing with her. She set both the phone and the microwave clock side by side and took a photo with her laptop webcam. In the image, both showed 12:03, but her phone, while holding the photo she just took, still said 3:21. Her skin felt like it didn't fit right anymore. She took the tea back to the bedroom, as if following some invisible track that wouldn't let her wander too far, and sat down again. The closet door was wide open. No breeze, no movement, no creaking hinges. Just open now, as if someone had quietly waited for her to leave the room, then decided to make their entrance. She didn't look inside. Not yet. She sat on the bed, phone in hand, and waited. For what, she wasn't sure. Maybe she thought time would skip again, and when she looked up, it would be evening and the shadows would explain themselves. Maybe this was a dream and she'd wake up, still at her apartment in Austin, with the sound of her neighbor's dog barking through the wall. Anything but this lingering, subtle wrongness. The coat closest to the door moved. Not much. Just enough to make the fabric fold slightly, like someone had brushed past it from behind. She stood up, her legs shaky now, and crossed to the closet again. This time, she didn't pause. She grabbed the edge of the coat and yanked it aside. There was no back to the closet. It stretched farther than should have been architecturally possible, farther than the house itself allowed. There was no wall behind the coats, only a long, narrow hallway made of the same old wood as the bedroom floor. Dim light spilled in from somewhere far away, barely illuminating the path. She stepped back, then further back, closed the door and pushed the little antique chair in front of it. She didn't sleep that night. She tried, but every time she closed her eyes, she'd open them to find herself sitting at the edge of the closet again, her legs crossed, her hand resting on the knob. Like sleep was a trick. And the house was dragging her back into that position while her conscious mind wandered. When she checked her phone the next morning. It was Tuesday. She'd arrived Sunday afternoon. She remembered making tea and reading the first page of a novel. But there were no photos in her gallery from Monday. The call log showed no missed calls, no outgoing texts. Just a gap, and the closet door was open again. This time she ran out the door, barefoot, grabbing her keys but not her bag. The screen door slapped shut behind her. She didn't look back. She drove into town, into Killeen proper, and parked at a gas station where the sun felt real and the people had weight to them. She sat in the car for hours, watching the seconds tick on the dashboard. They didn't skip. They moved in their natural, painful pace, one after the other. And when the sun finally set, she called the rental company, asked if someone else had access to the property, if there were hidden maintenance schedules or unusual quirks about the structure. The woman on the line hesitated, then said, "You're in the Albrecht place?" "Yes," she said. "The cottage on Route 439, the one with the green shutters." The woman went quiet. Then, "Ma'am, that property isn't available. It's under restoration." "No, it's not. I rented it. I'm staying there now. No one should have given you access. We took it off all our platforms 6 months ago. The last guest we had there, he never checked out. His car was still in the driveway. The police investigated, but they never found anything. There were unusual circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Another pause. Then, the timestamp on the security cam at the front door, his last recorded moment was 3 hours off. We never figured out why. But when they found his phone, the clock on it was a day ahead. Like something was playing with time. Inside, she didn't return to the house. She drove to Austin that night, shaking and awake the whole way. A month later, she checked the listing again. It was gone from every site. But sometimes, when she's lying in bed and closes her eyes, she wakes up to find herself standing in front of that closet, and it's open, and the coats are swaying. And something deep in the darkness whispers her name, not with a voice, but with time. The place had been a steal. A 2-bedroom rental on the outskirts of Fredericksburg, nestled behind a copse of twisted oak trees, with a wraparound porch and a clawfoot tub that still had the original enamel. $900 for the whole month, utilities included. Katie figured it was too good to be true, but she just left her job at the firm and needed a quiet place to decompress before moving to Austin for good. She didn't care about minor quirks or rustic charm. If the plumbing worked and the roof didn't leak, she'd survive. The realtor, a woman named Darla, with a smile that twitched when she spoke, handed over the keys without much fanfare. "Everything should be in working order," Darla said. "Just don't fiddle with the thermostat too much. It acts up sometimes." Then she offered a tight little wave and drove off in her powder blue sedan without waiting for Katie to respond. The house smelled of cedar and lemon oil, freshly cleaned, and the afternoon sun cast long lines across the hardwood floor. Katie dragged in her suitcase and laptop bag and settled into the master bedroom. Everything seemed fine at first. The water ran warm, the bed didn't creak, and the Wi-Fi, while a bit slow, was functional. But by evening, the temperature had started to rise, not dramatically, just enough to make her feel a little sticky, a little irritated. She padded out to the hallway where the digital thermostat was mounted like a glowing eye. It read 72 degrees, but it felt closer to 78. She tapped the down button. Nothing. The screen flickered once, then held steady. She tried again, this time pressing it harder. The screen glitched, static crawling over the numbers like tiny bugs, and then froze again on 72. Whatever, she thought. Probably needs recalibration. That night she slept with the windows open. The sound of cicadas filled the darkness. At some point around 3 a.m., she awoke choking on the air. It was thick, wet, like breathing through a sponge. The sheets clung to her skin, her nightshirt soaked through. She stumbled to the thermostat again and tried to lower it, this time punching the button in frustration. The screen went black, then flashed a message she didn't recognize. Just one word, no. Katie blinked. The screen returned to 72, steady as ever. She laughed. Nervously, but still a laugh. Probably a glitch in the firmware. She made a note to call Darla in the morning and return to bed. That smell came the next day. It wasn't immediate, it crept in like a whisper. Sweet at first, almost floral, like hot syrup. Then it soured. A burnt, meaty stench that hovered low to the ground, clinging to the furniture and the drapes. She thought something must have died in the walls. A mouse or raccoon, maybe. The house was old. It made sense. But the smell only came when the thermostat acted up, when the temperature spiked inexplicably, and the screen would flicker like a nervous eye. She called Darla, who didn't answer. Left a voicemail, then another. On the third try, Darla picked up with a brittle tone in her voice. Katie asked about the thermostat again, the smell, the weird glitches. There was a long pause. You're still at the rental? Yeah. Why? I thought, no one stayed there more than a few days in years. Katie's skin prickled. Why? It's temperamental. Some people say the insulation's bad. Others, well, they complain about things that don't make sense. Heat, smells, bad dreams. I don't know. If you're not comfortable, I can refund the rest of your stay. No, Katie said too quickly. I'm fine. Just wondering. That night, the heat came with a presence. She was half asleep on the couch, Netflix buffering endlessly when the air in the room shifted. It wasn't just hot anymore. It was oppressive, like someone had shut off all the ventilation and stuffed towels under the doors. Her skin prickled with sweat instantly. Then came the low hum, almost imperceptible at first, like a tuning fork vibrating deep inside the walls. She turned off the TV, sat still. The hum continued, and then footsteps. Slow, heavy, not on the floor, but above her. In the attic, her breath hitched. She grabbed her phone, flicked on the flashlight, and tiptoed to the hallway. The thermostat glowed in the dark like a nightlight, blinking now. One blink every second. Blink, blink. She reached the attic, pull-down ladder, and stared at the rope for a long moment. The humming had stopped, but the air felt electric. Like the static before a lightning strike, she didn't pull it. Instead, she went outside and stood barefoot on the gravel driveway, letting the night air cool her. Stars scattered overhead. Trees creaked in the distance. Something rustled in the bushes to her left, but she didn't turn. Didn't want to know. Inside, the house lights flickered. All of them. Then the porch light blinked once and died. She slept in her car that night, engine running, doors locked. By morning, she told herself she'd imagined it all. Heat exhaustion, stress, isolation. She even laughed about it, shaky and hollow. But when she went back in to grab her things, the house was ice cold. Frost had formed on the windows, and the thermostat read 72. She packed her bags quickly. As she zipped her suitcase, she noticed something on the wall above the thermostat. A faint outline in the wallpaper, darker than the rest. A square, like a patch, had once been removed. On a whim, she peeled at the edge. Behind the wallpaper was a metal plate sealed with rusted screws. Something had been locked in there once. She didn't want to know what. On her way out, she glanced at the thermostat one last time. The screen glitched and buzzed. Then, as she reached for the door, it flashed a single word again: stay. She slammed the door behind her and drove straight to Austin, never looking in the rearview mirror. A week later, she got a call from Darla. The house had caught fire, completely gutted. No one injured, but firefighters found something strange in the walls, what looked like scorched insulation and fragments of charred metal wiring around a small sealed furnace that had long since been disconnected from the home system. There were claw marks on the inside. Darla didn't say much else, just sighed and said she was retiring early. Katie never told anyone the truth. Not her friends, not the new landlord in Austin. But some nights, when the AC clicks on, she swears she hears that same low hum. And once, just once, her smart thermostat flickered in the dark and froze at 72. No matter how many times she pressed the button. She arrived just past dusk. The sky outside Marfa streaked with that strange purplish hue you only get out west, right before the black of desert night takes over. The air was cooling quick, the heat dropping like a rock off a ledge, and she liked that about this town. Quiet, artsy, weird. She'd booked the rental for a week solo getaway, she told herself. A time to write, clear her head, get away from Dallas. It was a one-story adobe-style place with rounded corners and thick walls that looked baked by the sun. The pictures online showed big windows, local textiles draped over chairs, and a little outdoor fire pit where you could watch the stars blink awake across the desert. But what the photos didn't show was the way the house sat on the edge of something not quite nothing, but not really town either. A dirt stretch behind the house opened into pale scrubland. No fence, no trail, just space. And it wasn't until her second night, when the silence started to hum like feedback in her ears, that she noticed the shadows didn't act quite right. It started small. She reached for a glass on the kitchen shelf, and in her periphery, her shadow hesitated half a beat too long. Not even a full second, just long enough for her to feel her stomach twist. She shook it off. Maybe it was the way the overhead light hit her, or a lag in her eyes adjusting. But later that night, brushing her teeth, she saw it again, this time more clearly. Her reflection moved as it should. The toothbrush in her mouth, hand at her jaw. But the shadow on the tile wall beside her was still, just standing there. Upright, stiff. The toothbrush wasn't there. The head tilted to the side like it was watching her. She spun around fast, chest tight, but there was nothing behind her. Just the faint rattle of the swamp cooler through the wall. She backed away from the mirror and kept the lights on that night. The next morning, she convinced herself she'd imagined it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she needed coffee. The desert air was doing something to her brain. She sat outside with her laptop and tried to work, watching a roadrunner dart across the dirt, a lizard twitch on a stone. Everything out there was harsh and alive. When the wind picked up, the house groaned like an old throat clearing itself. She chalked it up to the thick adobe walls adjusting to the heat. But by evening, when the shadows stretched longer across the living room floor, she noticed them again. They weren't where they were supposed to be. The sunset threw light through the windows, and her body should have cast a shape on the opposite wall. But when she moved, the shadow didn't. It stood still for a beat, then another. Then it twitched not. In the direction she'd moved, but toward her, like it was leaning in. She staggered back and turned on every lamp in the house. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the couch with her laptop open, pretending to write, refreshing her browser every 5 minutes, scrolling endlessly, looking for distraction. The shadows pulled behind the furniture. They didn't stretch from anything. Some looked like figures, shoulders, legs, even what could have been hair trailing along the plaster wall. They didn't move, but they also didn't fade when the lights changed. She called the rental owner the next morning. A man named Hector who sounded like he hadn't had coffee yet. "Hi, I'm sorry, but there's something weird with the lighting in the house. Like the shadows don't match up. Have other guests ever mentioned it?" He was quiet for a moment, then said slowly, "Ma'am, this is the first time I've listed that place in a year. You're the first one back in." She blinked. "A year?" "Had to replace a few walls. Pipes burst. It was unoccupied. Desert doesn't forgive when you leave a house empty." She asked him if anyone had died there. He laughed, but not in a funny way. "No, ma'am, but folks in Marfa. Some don't run out that side of town anymore. Not since the lights started showing up again. You know about those?" "The Marfa lights?" she asked. "I thought that was just some tourist thing." "Some say that. Others say different. Some think they're just headlights. Others think they open things up. Places things slip through." "What kind of things?" But he didn't answer. Just said he'd call her back and hung up. She didn't hear from him again. That night, the shadows weren't just still. They were multiplying. One in the hall, one by the kitchen, one that crawled just above the ceiling fan blades like a black stain that pulsed slightly. The worst was the one in the bedroom. It wasn't hers, and it never moved. It stood in the far corner against the rough white wall facing her. She thought maybe it was just a smudge on the plaster, but no matter what angle she looked from, it had shape, definition, fingers, a long neck, a dip where the mouth might be. She turned to run and caught sight of herself in the mirror on the closet door and froze. Her reflection was breathing. She wasn't. She gasped, staggered back, and fagged. Her reflection didn't move. It stared at her with wide, twitching eyes, then its mouth opened far wider than hers could, a silent scream that showed too many teeth. She ran out the front door barefoot and into the night. The desert wind slammed behind her, and something followed. Not footsteps, not noise, just the thick hum of presence. She sprinted to the edge of the property, but there was no border, no fence. The land just kept going. When she turned around, the house had changed. Not in shape, not in structure, but every window was black. No light. And from inside those windows, the shadows watched. She didn't go back in. She stayed in her car till sunrise, locked in tight, engine off, shivering from something more than cold. Her laptop had been left behind, and with it, her phone charger. In the daylight, the house looked normal again, quiet, like nothing had happened. She went in, grabbed her stuff fast. Didn't shower, didn't brush her teeth, just scooped what she could into her bag and left the key on the counter. As she drove out of Marfa, she looked once into the rearview. She didn't see herself, just the shadow of someone sitting in the back seat smiling. It was a clean little room off the highway near Burnett, the kind of place people booked for a quick overnight, no frills, no breakfast buffet, just a creaky ice machine out front and a faded neon vacancy sign that flickered whenever a semi rolled by too fast. Mason had been on the road since before dawn, his eyes burning from the long haul out of Lubbock, and he was too tired to be picky. The lady at the front desk gave him room 8, a corner unit with one window overlooking the parking lot and a bedspread the color of old mustard. He dumped his backpack on the chair and stretched his back. The air smelled faintly of mildew masked by lemon cleaner, and the only noise was the occasional hum of a car drifting past outside. He checked the locks, tried the remote for the TV, 3 channels worked, and then turned to the nightstand to plug in his charger. That's when he saw it, tucked halfway back in the drawer beside a Gideon Bible and 2 crumpled fast food napkins. A phone. It was a beat-up Android model. Screen cracked like a spiderweb, no case. Curious, Mason picked it up. The battery icon in the top corner showed 12%, yet it wasn't plugged in. No SIM card. No Wi-Fi connected. But as soon as he touched the screen, it lit up. Get out. The words blinked in bold white against a black background, then vanished. He waited. The screen dimmed, then died. Mason frowned, pressed the side button. Nothing. Just the shattered reflection of his face under the bedside lamp. He opened a drawer, fully no charger cord, no packaging, nothing to suggest anyone had forgotten it there. Maybe a guest had left it and the cleaning staff never noticed. He tossed the phone on the bed, plugged in his own, and went to take a shower. By the time he came back out, towel around his waist, the strange phone was lit up again. Get out. Get out. Get out. 3 lines now, blinking in unison, then fading to black. He stared at it, chest still damp, pulse rising. He picked it up again, checked the notifications. Nothing. No apps. No missed calls. No way to even swipe into a home screen. Just darkness. Until it lit again. Too late. The air felt heavier in the room suddenly, like the AC had shut off, though he could still hear it humming above the window. He stood still for a moment, towel clutched in one hand, waiting for something. He wasn't sure what. The phone didn't glow again. Not yet. He dressed quickly, trying to shake it off. Probably some prank app. Maybe it was jailbroken and someone programmed it with a looped message. But he knew enough about phones to know one without a SIM card shouldn't be able to do that, especially not without Wi-Fi, and especially not with no user interface at all. He tried turning it off. The screen flickered. The glow dimmed. Stay and you'll hear them. That was new. He left it on the nightstand and backed toward the door. He told himself he'd go ask the manager if anyone had lost a phone recently. But when he reached for the doorknob, he noticed the lock had twisted itself back into place. Click. Not the sound of a lock engaging. A different kind of clicking, wet, almost like bone against wood. From inside the room, behind him, he turned fast. Nothing there. But the light in the bathroom flickered. Just once, and the phone was glowing again. You're not alone. His breath hitched. Mason took a step forward. The air was colder now, noticeably so, like something had cracked open a window. But everything was shut. Curtains drawn. He moved slowly toward the bed, toward the phone, which now sat perfectly centered on the mattress. He could swear he hadn't left it there. It lit again before he touched it. They're coming up through the floor. He stumbled back. There was a low groan under the carpet, like old wood under strain, but the motel was all concrete. He'd parked right in front of the room, seen the slab foundation himself. No crawl space. Still, something shifted beneath the floor. He crouched, pressed his ear to the ground. At first, silence, then tapping, a dragging sound, a soft sucking. Noise like wet fabric being pulled slowly from mud. He scrambled back, heart hammering. He grabbed the phone and bolted for the door. Lock. He twisted the knob, rattled a deadbolt, even kicked at it. Nothing. Like it had fused shut. The windows wouldn't budge either, and the glass looked thicker now, almost warping at the edges, like it was pulsing slightly. He turned back toward the bed and saw the phone had lit up again, even though it was still in his hand. Below you, the carpet bulged, right beneath the bed. Something was pushing up from underneath, not fast but deliberate. A mound rising steadily like a bubble in paint. Mason backed against the far wall, holding the useless phone like it was a weapon. The bulge split slightly. Fabric tore. And from the opening, pale fingers emerged. Thin, too long, the nails cracked and gray like splinters. They curled against the carpet, dragging themselves out. He threw the phone at the bed and screamed. The fingers retreated instantly. The carpet flattened. Silence. But not peace. The air still pulsed, and his ears felt tight, like the pressure had dropped. He stepped toward the bed, looked down, nothing but carpet. The phone had landed near the pillow, face down. He picked it up slowly. It felt heavier. The screen glowed without him pressing a thing. Don't look under the bed. He looked out, it was instinct. He didn't mean to, but his eyes moved before his mind could stop them, and what he saw, a face pressed to the underside of the mattress from below, as if the material was see-through from that angle. The skin was blue-white, lips sewn shut, eyes wide open and bulging, staring straight back at him. Mason screamed and staggered back, hitting the wall. The phone glowed again in his hand. You saw her. Now you stay. The bed began to shake softly. At first, then more violently. He dove for his bag, yanked it open, pulled out the crowbar he kept for roadside emergencies. He swung it at the window glass, didn't even crack. Not a scratch. He screamed again, desperate now. The phone buzzed in his palm. The message changed out, it's a trade. Your eyes for hers. He dropped the phone like it burned him, but it didn't fall. It hovered. A few inches off the ground, vibrating. In place. Then it spun slowly and pointed toward him like a compass needle. The light from the screen grew brighter, burning white. Mason shielded his eyes, and in that glare, he heard whispering hundreds of voices, all layered atop each other. Moaning, pleading, some in languages he didn't recognize. Some just hissing, weeping. One voice rose above the rest, a girl's voice. I'm still here. Don't leave me. Don't go. He pressed his hands to his ears, backed into the bathroom. The mirror had fogged over, but the shower hadn't run, and in the fog, words appeared, drawn by an unseen finger. Put the phone in the drawer. He didn't ask why. He didn't argue. He picked it up, held it at arm's length, carried it back to the nightstand and dropped it in. The drawer closed itself. The lights flickered once, and everything went quiet. No shaking. No messages. No fingers clawing through the carpet. He didn't sleep. He just sat there, watching the drawer, until the sun finally came up. At checkout, the lady at the front desk asked if everything was all right. He told her yes, fine, great. Just tired. As he walked out to his truck, she called after him. Oh, almost forgot, she said, holding up something. It was the phone. I think you left this in the drawer. He didn't take it. He just got in the truck. And he never stopped. At another roadside motel again. The wind had stilled just after sunset. One of those strange, too silent nights where the crickets gave up early, the frogs hushed, and even the trees seemed afraid to rustle. Mason Halbrook sat on the old front porch swing, beer in hand, boots planted wide on the planks that creaked under his weight. He stared out at the wide blackness of the Texas brushland beyond the dirt road, the last of the red in the sky bleeding out behind a row of low hills. His little rental house sat about 30 miles outside of Sonora, closer to the nothing than to anything. No neighbors, no stores, no cell service. That was the appeal when he booked it. A week away from everything. No clients, no ex-wife, no noise except what nature offered. He'd driven 6 hours straight from Houston and unpacked in silence, letting the open space settle over him like a weighted blanket. He'd been there 2 nights already, and both had passed uneventfully, save for the usual groans of an old house settling into the cool after the day's sun. The faucet in the kitchen dripped, but only when he wasn't looking at it. The bedroom door nudged itself ajar sometimes, but he chalked that up to bad framing. These weren't things that got under Mason's skin. He'd grown up in East Texas, knew what old houses did at night, knew the way heat and ghosts of wind moved through wood and gaps. But this third night was different. He didn't feel tired, not physically. Something itched behind his eyes, a buzz in his teeth like an old TV left on mute. He chalked it up to caffeine and stress, his body still winding down from a year that felt like hell. Divorce finalized. Business partnership crumbling, the IRS breathing down his neck. He should have felt free here. Instead, he felt watched. He turned to go inside around 9:45. The swing creaked once more as he stood. And that was when he heard it. A baby. Crying just once. Short. Sharp. He froze. There was no one for miles. Literally, the old woman who rented the house. To him, Mrs. Carol, or Carlton, something like that, had made it very clear when he picked up the key in town. "Ain't no one out there but deer and mesquite, honey," she'd said, with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Good place for peace, or secrets. He stood on the porch, the hair on the back of his neck stiff as wires. He waited, breath. Shallow. Nothing. Just that too still night. He told himself it was a coyote. Some of them made awful sounds, sounded like women crying, children screaming. He'd read that. Convinced himself of it. But then it came again. Closer. Crying. A soft wail, low and tired. Mason squinted into the darkness beyond the porch light, which only reached about 10 feet before giving way to shadows. He didn't see anything, just dry. Brush, a dead fence, and the faint trail of the driveway. "Nope," he muttered and went inside. Locked the door. 10 minutes passed. He made a sandwich, poured a bourbon, turned on the TV-only DVDs here. No satellite, no cable. Just a dusty stack of old westerns and a weird documentary about Texas graveyards. He put on Tombstone for background noise and tried to ignore how thick the silence felt beneath Val Kilmer's drawl. Then the crying started again. Inside. He dropped the glass. It shattered. The sound had come from the hallway just off the kitchen, the one that led to the guest room and the back door. He didn't move. Just stood, every muscle clenched, heart rattling. The crying stopped. Giggling started. Not playful, not babyish, more like mimicry, like something that had heard a baby laugh once, and was trying to remember how to do it. Then came the knock. Not loud, not hurried. Just 3 soft knocks on the front door, but not in the center. Just to the right. Low, like someone too short to reach. The knob had tried to knock where they could. Mason moved slowly toward the door, stepping wide over the broken glass. He didn't say anything, didn't call out. He just moved like something ancient and slow had clicked on inside him. He peeked through the PEEPHOLE. No one, but the screen door creaked open. He hadn't heard it unlatch. Then he saw the doorknob twitch. Just slightly. A testing little jiggle, like a child learning how things worked. He backed away, went to the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife, called himself an idiot the whole time, but his body wouldn't stop, wouldn't let him pretend it was nothing. Crying started again, now from the back door. 3 knocks, low, soft. Then silence. Then scratching. Not like an animal. Fingernails. Dragging. He didn't sleep. He sat on the couch all night with the knife across his lap. The TV hissing static now because the DVD had stopped and he didn't notice. When the sun finally came, he stood, knees locked with stiffness, and opened both doors. No footprints. No marks. Nothing. He thought about leaving. But something in him didn't want to look scared. Didn't want to be that guy who fled in the morning light. That night, it began again. Crying. Then giggling. Then knocking, this time from the closet in the guest room. Mason didn't open it. He just nailed it shut. Day 4, he walked the property with a shotgun he found in the attic unloaded. Dusty, but comforting. He found tracks. Bare feet. Small, but not baby small. Not human either. 6 toes. On 1 foot. The left one. That night, the knocking came from the attic door. He didn't even go up there. He just pushed a chair against the door and sat in the hall with the knife again, trying to hum something. Anything. The thing mimicked him, hummed it back. Off dash key dot out of sync dot like a delay. On a bad call dot it said his name dot once dot whispered dot then came the crying again, and the voice like wet paper tearing. I'm so cold. He didn't sleep again. Didn't eat that day 5 he drove to town. Asked the clerk at the gas station if anything strange ever happened at the old Carroll place. The guy went pale. You staying out there? Mason nodded. Jesus, the guy muttered. I thought that place got condemned after the sheriff's kid went missing. That was years ago. Baby just vanished. They never found him. Just his blanket in the fireplace. Mason didn't. Respond. Just drove back. Something inside him knew he had to see it through. That night. There was no crying. Just silence until 3:11. A.M. Then came the sound of crawling above the ceiling. Then the smell. Burnt fabric and sour milk. And then the front door slowly creaked open on its own. He stood in the hallway. Waiting. The knife shaking in his hand, and he saw it. Just for a second. Something hunched. Small, but wrong. Its skin blistered and gray. Its eyes wide and boiling. Its mouth too big, stretched with a scream that never came. Then it was gone. He left the next morning. Didn't tell the owner. Didn't ask for a refund. Didn't even lock the door behind him. Because some things you don't trap. Some things you just get away from and hope they never follow. But sometimes they do. Because last night in his downtown apartment in Houston, he heard it again. Crying. Then giggling. Then 3 soft knocks. Just below the doorknob. She left a day early at least. That's what the owner, Michael, swore. He had the message time-stamped and everything. Her text came through just after 6:30 in the morning, a short message. Heading out now. Thanks again for everything. He didn't think much of it. The little blue house she'd rented was out on the edge of Dripping Springs, tucked beneath a stretch of cedar trees that clung to the edge of a narrow hill. Most of his guests didn't stay their full term anyway. Something about the silence out there got to people. No cell towers for miles, and if the wind shifted right, you could hear the faintest whispering hum of the Pedernales River. Even when it hadn't rained in weeks. Michael drove out the next afternoon to reset the place. The weather was dry and the driveway gravel crunched louder than usual beneath his tires. When he stepped out of his truck, the air felt heavy like someone had just been there, like maybe they still were. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was cool, the way he always left the thermostat. The curtains had been drawn shut, but light slanted through a narrow slit in the living room. Nothing seemed disturbed. The linens on the couch were folded. The kitchen was tidy. He moved to the bedroom and froze. The bed was made, but not in the lazy, half-pulled kind of way that guests usually left it. This was tucked, tight, like hospital tight, corners crisp. The top sheet had been pulled so far up that the pillow was completely hidden under it, as if someone had tried to trap something in the bed. He stood there a moment, listening, then shook it off. Maybe she'd just been neat. He wasn't used to that, was all. He stripped the bed, pulled the sheets, dumped the towels into the laundry bag, and by the time he'd sprayed the last bit of disinfectant on the sink handles, he'd already moved on in his head. That was until the review came. It posted 2 days later. The platform sent him a push notification. He clicked it from his phone and read it in full. I never left. That was it. No stars, no complaint, no compliment. Just those 3 words. At first, he assumed it was some kind of joke, or maybe she'd meant it romantically, like she never wanted to leave. Guess got poetic sometimes. But then he noticed something that made his stomach turn. The review was time-stamped the day after she left. Not even just hours after. 28 hours later, he opened her profile to message her. But when the screen loaded, he saw her profile photo had changed. It had once been a clear, smiling, selfie blonde hair, a nose ring, sunglasses propped on top of her head. He remembered that face because it reminded him of someone he used to know. Now, the photo was different. It was her, but not really. Same woman, but her face looked pale. Lips pressed together. Hair down over her shoulders, wet and stringy. Like she'd just gotten caught in the rain. And her eyes. They weren't looking into the camera like before. They were off to the side, looking at something or someone. He blinked and refreshed the page. The photo stayed the same. He hit the message guest button and typed, "Hey, just saw your review. Is everything okay?" No response. Not after an hour. Not after a day. He tried to report the review as suspicious, but Airbnb's help desk said it came from her verified account with no evidence of hacking. When he pushed again, explaining the timeline issue, they promised to escalate the case. That was 3 days ago. He hadn't heard anything since. Then came the emails. He got the first one at 2:17 a.m. It was just an attachment. A photo. No subject. No body text. The photo was of the inside of the blue house. The living room. Curtains drawn just like he'd left them. But the figure in the corner wasn't his. It was her. She was crouched beside the bookshelf, knees tucked up to her chest. Long hair draped forward. But the part that made him drop the phone was her eyes. They were wide, too wide, and her mouth was open in a scream he couldn't hear. He stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. Then he locked the phone, turned on all the lights in his own home, and told himself it was fake. A hoax, some screwed-up troll playing games. But the next night, another email came. This one was worse. It was a video. The file was grainy, low resolution, shaky. Looked like it had been taken from an old flip phone or maybe some analog security feed. It was a shot of the bedroom. From up near the ceiling, like a camera had been planted in the corner where the two walls met. The video showed the bed. And her. Not walking, not moving, just lying there, eyes wide open, arms stiff at her sides. Her head twitched once, then again. A slow, jerky motion, like something was tugging it from underneath the bed. Then the footage cut out. Michael didn't sleep. He called the police the next morning and asked for a welfare check. They said the last known record showed she'd crossed through Junction, Texas, 2 hours after her checkout text. Credit card records showed a gas station charge. That was it. No activity after that. Her phone pinged a tower once, then went dark. The officer asked him if he knew her well. He said no, just a guest. "You're not the only one who's called," the officer said. "Her family's been trying to find her. We're treating it as a missing person." Michael hung up and went back out to the blue house. He had to see it again. Had to be sure. Everything looked the same. Curtains, couch, bed. But in the hallway, the mirror. He didn't remember a mirror being there before. It was mounted waist-high, framed in rusted metal. The kind of mirror that felt like it came with a warning. He stepped toward it slowly, and when he looked into it, he didn't see himself. He saw her, not her whole face. Just part of it. Her left cheek, her mouth, one eye. The rest of her was pressed up against something, like she was behind glass or stuck in a space too small for her body. He turned away fast, heart hammering. Stepped out of the house, locked the door, and called Airbnb. Told him to delist the place. Said it was no longer available. That night, he deleted his account. But the emails didn't stop. Every night at 2:17 a.m. Like clockwork. Always a new picture. A new frame from inside. The house. Sometimes she was on the couch. Sometimes crouched near the door. Sometimes staring directly at the camera. But last night's photo was different. It was his house, his living room, and she was sitting in his recliner. Smiling. Tonight is 2:10, and the lights are starting to flicker.